1. The Crow and Advice from the Dove. The crow and the dove were good friends, living together in a forest. The crow felt disliked by everyone and decided to leave. As it said goodbye to the dove, the crow expressed its sadness. "Nobody here likes me. They hate my call. I really can't stay any longer, although I don't want to leave at all." After hearing this, the dove thought for a moment and said, "If you don't change your call, you won't be welcome no matter where you go." Meaning, there's a great saying, if you always blame others, you will never understand the issues clearly. If you look within yourself, things will become clear. A sign of maturity is taking full responsibility for oneself. Taking responsibility for your mistakes and not avoiding them when they happen is the key to personal improvement. 2. Staying calm when faced with rudeness. There was an old man who liked to read newspapers and would visit the nearest store daily to buy them. The sales clerk there, noticing that the man only bought newspapers, looked down on him and always acted arrogantly and rudely. A friend of the old man, unable to understand, asked, "He treats you like that. Why don't you just buy your newspaper somewhere else?" The old man smiled and replied, "If I were to avoid this young man and buy my newspaper elsewhere, I'd have to go out of my way more, wasting not just my time but adding hassle. Besides, his lack of manners and rudeness are his problems. Why should I change my mood because of someone like that?" Moral: we can't decide how others will act, but we can choose how we respond. Holding grudges based on others' mistakes is like punishing ourselves for their faults. 3. When the horse lost its freedom. Once upon a time, there was a horse that lived on a meadow, enjoying lush grass every day and leading a very happy and comfortable life. One day, a deer appeared. The horse became very angry, feeling that the deer had invaded its territory and personal space. So, the horse asked a human for help to drive the deer away. The human said that if the horse agreed to wear a bridle and allow the human to ride on its back, he would use the most effective weapon to chase away the deer. The horse happily agreed. After the man rode the horse and chased the deer away, the horse realized it had become a slave to the human. Moral: in life, fools try to pull each other down while the wise try to lift each other up. Those who are narrow-minded and materialistic, unable to tolerate others, will ultimately face the consequences themselves, making their path forward increasingly narrow. If we can be more forgiving and see things more broadly, we can foster better relationships. 4. Crossing the bridge together. One day, two close friends crossed a dangerous iron bridge together. They held each other's hand tightly while grabbing onto the bridge's railing with their other hand, slowly moving forward step by step. Seeing how easily they crossed, someone asked, "How did you two manage to do that? You should know that the terrain here is treacherous and the sound of the water is as loud as thunder. Almost no one can make it across successfully." Both were surprised. One of them said, "I can't see, so I don't know what the terrain is like." The other replied, "I can't hear, so I don't know what the water sounds like." It turned out that those who had fallen off were the ones with sharp eyes and keen ears. Moral: when dealing with others, the most frightening thing is being distracted and chaotic, which makes it hard to achieve great things. Only when your mind is stable, undistracted, and not disturbed by external factors, focusing on one thing at a time, can you achieve success. 5. The donkey's escape. A farmer was leading his donkey to the market when passing by a well, the donkey accidentally fell in. The farmer was very worried and tried every possible way to rescue the donkey, but all his efforts were in vain. Hearing the donkey's desperate cries from the bottom of the well and thinking about how it would starve to death down there, the farmer felt a twist in his heart, Unable to bear the sight of his beloved donkey suffering, he thought it would be better to bury it and end its misery quickly. So he grabbed a shovel and started to fill in the well. However, to the farmer's surprise, every time he threw dirt into the well, the donkey shook it off and stepped on top of the mound of soil. Gradually, the donkey climbed higher and eventually managed to escape from the well. Moral: life isn't always smooth sailing. Everyone faces ups and downs. In moments of despair, if you don't give up, there will be a turning point. All hardships and difficulties can ultimately serve as stepping stones on your path, helping you climb faster and stand taller. 6. The wild dog and the mirror. A wild dog accidentally entered a large room lined with mirrors. Seeing many dogs suddenly appearing around him, the wild dog panicked. He glared at them fiercely, not realizing they were glaring back just as fiercely. The wild dog angrily said, "Don't think you can defeat me just because there are many of you. I am a dog experienced in battle." At that moment, the dogs in the mirror all seemed to smile broadly, showing off their shiny teeth. Terrified, the wild dog charged at one of the mirrors and smashed it, causing it to shatter. His head bled profusely. Moral: life is like a mirror. How you treat others is how they will treat you. If you want to receive something, you must first give. Offer kindness and receive sincerity. Be warm to others and get warmth in return. Speak well of others and earn their admiration. 7. Lessons from the chestnut. A child saw a bottle filled with chestnuts and really wanted to eat them, so he put his hand into the jar to grab some. He gripped a large handful, but when he tried to pull his hand out, he found that the neck of the bottle was too small and his hand was stuck. The child started to cry helplessly. A passerby saw this and told the child, "Just take fewer than half, and you'll be able to get your hand out easily. Learn to be content." Meaning, life isn't unsatisfactory because you have too little, but because you want too much. If you let your desires expand uncontrollably, they will control you and you'll end up trapping yourself. Chasing minor advantages only leads to greater losses. Only by letting go of greed can you gain what you truly want. By restraining our desires, we can live more freely and comfortably. Often, living poorly isn't because we lack abilities, but because we're stuck in our usual ways and lack breakthroughs. Life is a continuous process of growth and awakening. Many great life principles that inspire can often be reflected in the smallest, most ordinary aspects of life. With these stories, I hope they can serve as a beacon to guide you on your pursuit of happiness. 8. A sweet gift. I found an empty bench in the park under some drooping willow trees, nibbling on my bitter feelings about life, feeling as if the world was crushing me. Just when I thought my misery couldn't increase, a child ran up, breathless from playing, and tilted his head to say, "Look what I found." In his hand, he held a bedraggled flower with wrinkled petals, suffering from lack of water and light. To send him away and get back to my gloom, I forced a smile and shooed him off. Instead of leaving, the boy sat next to me, lifted the flower to his nose, and joyfully exclaimed, "It smells amazing. It must have been a beautiful flower. I picked it for you." The flower, fading and nearly withered, showed no clear colors but a mix of dull red and orange. I knew I had to accept it or he wouldn't leave me alone. Reluctantly, I reached out to take the flower and muttered, "All right, give it here." Instead of placing it in my hand, he let the flower hover in the air absent-mindedly. That's when I realized the boy was blind. My voice trembled as I thanked him. He smiled and went back to playing, unaware of how deeply he had touched me. I sat still, wondering how this blind boy saw a forlorn woman under the trees, how he sensed the dire situation I was giving up to. Perhaps from his heart came the true light. Through the eyes of a blind child, I finally saw that the real difficulties lie within myself, not the world. And in all the misery I created, I was the one who was truly blind. I vowed to see the world for its real beauty and cherish every moment of life. Then I brought the flower to my nose and savored the sweet scent of a pristine rose.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
9. Why wait? Why wait for a smile to feel truly beautiful? Why wait until you're lonely to realize the value of a friend? Why wait to be loved before you start loving someone? Why wait for a good job to start working? Why wait until you have a lot to share, just a little? Why wait for a failure to remember a piece of advice? Why wait for pain before remembering a wish? Why wait until you have time to start serving others? My friend, why wait? Because you might not know how long you'll have to wait. 10. Best friends. A World War I soldier was filled with horror when he saw his closest friend fall on the battlefield. Stuck in a trench with constant artillery fire overhead, the soldier asked his commander for permission to go out into no man's land between the trenches to retrieve his wounded teammate. The commander said, "You may go, but I think it won't be worth it. Your friend might already be dead, and you could lose your life too." Ignoring the commander's advice, the soldier left anyway. Miraculously, he managed to reach his friend, lifted him onto his shoulders, and brought him back to their trench. As both fell into the trench, the commander checked the wounded soldier and looked at his friend sympathetically. "I told you it wasn't worth it," the commander said. "Your friend is dead and you are severely injured." The soldier replied, "Even so, it was worth it, sir." "Worth it? Your friend is dead. What do you mean?" "Sir, it was worth it because when I got to him, he was still alive, and I was fulfilled when he told me, 'Jim, I knew you would come for me.' In life, whether something is worth doing depends on how we see it. Be brave and follow your heart so later in life you won't regret not doing something. I hope each of us will be embraced by such genuine friends. 11. Medicine for Sorrow. This story is about a woman who recently lost her son. In her immense grief, she approached a wise man. "Is there a prayer or a spell you know that can bring my son back to life?" she asked in desperation. Instead of dismissing her or suggesting she find comfort, the wise man replied, "Bring me a mustard seed from a family that has never known sorrow. It can be used to heal your pain." The woman thanked him and immediately set out to find this magical seed. She first visited a large, luxurious house, knocked on the door, and asked, "I'm looking for a mustard seed from a home that has never known sorrow. Is this the place?" They told her she was mistaken. They shared with her the tragic events that had happened to them. She stayed and comforted them. Then she continued her search for the happiest family. But wherever she went, from grand houses to humble attics, she was met with sad stories. She became so involved in caring for and sharing the burdens of others that eventually she forgot about her quest for the magical mustard seed. Without realizing it, that very search had gradually eased her own pain. 12. Returning home. A soldier returns home to reunite with his family after years of fighting overseas. From San Francisco, he calls his family to check in. "Mom and Dad, I'm coming home, but there's something I need to ask. I want to bring a friend home with me." "Of course, son. We'd be happy to welcome your friend." "There's something you should know, though. He was severely injured in the war, losing an arm and both legs. He has nowhere else to go, so I want him to stay with us." "We're sorry to hear that. Maybe we can help him find a place to stay." "Oh no, I want him to live with us." "You don't realize what you're asking, son. A person with such disabilities will be a burden on us. We have our own lives, and we can't let something like this interfere. It's best you come home and forget about him. He'll probably find a way to fend for himself soon enough." Upon hearing this, the son hangs up the phone. A few days later, they receive a shocking call from the San Francisco police informing them that their son has died after falling from a high-rise building. The police believe it was suicide. Distraught, the parents quickly fly to San Francisco and are led to the city morgue to identify their son's body. They recognize him immediately, but are horrified to realize something else at the same time. Their son had only one arm and one leg. 13. The odometer of life. Some people say life is like a highway. It's a good way to think about life. I imagine I'm driving on my life's road at 60 miles per hour. I cover a mile every minute. It seems I've lived on this highway for about 12,500,000 minutes, meaning my odometer could read 12,500,000 miles. I wonder how many miles I've used to admire the road or to look out the window. I wonder how many miles I've spent looking in the rear-view mirror, not caring how fast I was going. I wonder how many miles I've driven through roundabouts and how many times I've ignored traffic signs even though they were always there. I wonder how many miles I couldn't steer because I was too drunk, and how many accidents I've caused. I wonder how many miles I've felt sorry for myself, or how many miles I've spent singing my favorite songs on the radio. I wonder how many miles I've driven for myself and how many miles I've driven for someone I care about. I wonder how many miles I've passed someone on the road I was on without stopping to help them. I wonder how many miles I've buckled up and how many miles I've driven with my hands off the wheel. I wonder how many miles I've driven alone and how many miles I've laughed out loud with friends and family in the back seat. I wonder how many miles I will drive before I know where I'm going. 14. Bend, but don't break. One of my dearest childhood memories is walking along and sitting by the riverbank. There, I enjoyed the peace and quiet, watching the still water flow and listening to birds sing and leaves rustle. I also watched bamboo stalks bending under the wind and then snapping back up when the wind died down. Thinking about how the bamboo bends and straightens back to its original position made me think of resilience. Relating this to people, resilience means the ability to recover from shock, sadness, or any condition that has stretched a person's emotions to the limit. Have you ever felt almost defeated, like you were nearly broken? Be thankful that you're still here to talk about that experience. During that tough time, you might have felt a mix of emotions threatening your own health. You felt emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and physically uncomfortable. Life is a mix of beautiful moments and dark times, moments of joy and of misery. Misfortunes might nearly break you, but try to bend and endure. Don't let yourself break. Strive not to let circumstances defeat you. A little hope can carry you through tough challenges. With hope for a brighter tomorrow or a better future, things might not seem so bad. That tough challenge will eventually become easier to face, and the outcome will be worth it. If life gets tough and you're at a breaking point, show your resilience. Like the bamboo, bend, but do not break. 15. Coffee and cups. A group of successful former students decided to visit their old teacher. After catching up for a bit, they started to vent about the stresses they face at work and in their personal lives. Hearing this, the teacher went into the kitchen to make some coffee for his former students. He brought out a variety of cups. Some were porcelain, some were plastic, others were glass or crystal. A few looked very plain. Some were expensive and some were exquisitely crafted. The teacher told these successful people to choose a cup and pour themselves some coffee. After everyone had a cup of coffee in hand, the teacher began to speak slowly. If you noticed, everyone chose the expensive cups and no one opted for the simple plastic ones. You might think it's normal to want the best for yourself, but that is actually the source of most of your problems in life. You see, the cup does not affect the quality of the coffee. All you really need is the coffee, not the cup. Yet you often focus so much on finding the best cup, and then you even look over at your neighbor's cup to see if theirs might be better than yours. Think about this. Life is the coffee, while the job, money, and social status are the cups. These cups do not define or change the quality of our lives. Sometimes, by focusing too much on the cups, we fail to enjoy the life that we have. The gift God gave us is the coffee, not the cups. So enjoy your coffee and cherish the beautiful life you have. 16. A space reserved for love. My dad used to joke with me saying, "Remember to save a seat for me at the table after I'm gone." And I would reply, "Only the good ones die young. I might leave before you, so maybe you'll have to save a seat for me instead." Eventually, my father passed away. I kept my promise for many years. Every day I would leave one chair empty, the spot where my father used to sit at the table. People found it odd. An empty seat like that will just make everyone miss him more and feel sadder. In the beginning, it was true. But time has a way of turning pain into something meaningful. I read in a book that, according to an ancient tradition, on Christmas Day, you should leave an empty seat at the dinner table so the family can invite a poor guest who has nowhere to eat. Keeping an empty seat at the table makes any guest feel more welcome and at ease. The empty seat at the dining table isn't just for remembrance, it's left vacant to be filled. If you have no guests on Christmas, be grateful because the memories are still there in that empty space. And it's wonderful if someone does come to fill that space. It then gets filled with your openness and warmth. Hope that you always have such a space in your life and in your heart, reserved for memories and then for love to land and stay forever. 17. The magic spell. There was a wise man who, knowing he was about to join his ancestors, summoned his children to his bedside. He pointed to his vast collection of books and revealed a secret. "Now, I will share a secret with you. This great library was a gift from a saint who saw our poverty yet noticed my dedication to studying. Along with this priceless gift, the saint said, 'Within this infinite library, there is one book that is the most valuable. Within that most valuable book there is one page that is the most precious, and on that page there is a magic spell. Whoever reads this spell will become the wisest among the wise.'" "Which book is it, Father?" his eldest son quickly asked. I wanted to ask the saint that very question, but he vanished before I could. The father paused briefly, then poured his remaining strength into his final words. "I have spent my life reading, yet I have not found that precious book. You have your whole lives ahead of you. Devote yourselves to reading. I hope you will be luckier than I was and find that sacred spell." Heeding their father's advice, the children diligently read day after day. They read tirelessly, but because the library seemed infinite, they never came across that treasured book. However, through the knowledge they gathered over the years, they became respected scholars. 18. Duty and love. Duty might compel someone to build a house, but only love can turn that house into a home. Duty might make a dinner, but love adds the special flavors that make the meal delightful. Duty writes many letters, but love includes a funny story or a quirky drawing of a candy. Duty can be frustrating if someone's efforts go unnoticed. However, love makes one smile more and feel immediately rewarded in the very act of doing. Duty might mix a glass of milk, but love adds a touch of sweetness to it. Duty demands sacrifice, but love brings peace. Duty obliges us to do and to know, but love helps us appreciate what we have, will have, and are about to have. 19. Reflections on love and missed opportunities. 1. Have you ever noticed that you miss someone the most when they are right beside you but aren't yours? 2. Have you ever regretted saying something, wishing you hadn't spoken, or kept silent and later wished you had spoken up? Which hurts more? 3. Have you ever noticed that the most important things are also the hardest to say? 4. Have you ever been hesitant to tell someone you love them? If you tell them, they might hurt you, but if you don't, you might hurt them. 5. Have you ever felt reluctant to care too much for someone because you're afraid they won't care as much about you, or maybe not at all? 6. Have you ever thought that life is full of risks and requires taking leaps of faith? Don't be someone who always looks back and wonders what could have been or what shouldn't have been done, because nothing waits forever. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 20. The Tale of the Candle. One evening during a power outage, a candle was placed in the center of the room. It was lit and glowed brightly. The candle was thrilled to realize that its small flame brought light to the whole room. Everyone exclaimed, "Wow, the candle is so bright. We're lucky. Otherwise, we wouldn't see anything." Hearing this, the candle joyfully pushed back the darkness around it. However, as it burned, drops of hot wax began to drip down its sides, gradually making the candle shorter. When only half was left, the candle panicked. "Oh no, if I keep burning like this, I'll soon burn out. Why should I suffer this way?" Then, it decided to let a passing breeze snuff it out. A thin wisp of smoke rose, and the candle went silent. People in the room frantically said, "The candle has gone out. It's too dark. What do we do now?" The candle smiled smugly, proud of its importance. But suddenly someone suggested, "Candles are easily blown out by the wind. Let me find an oil lamp." The oil lamp was lit, and the half-burned candle was put away in a drawer. The candle felt deeply sad. From now on, it would lie in the drawer, seldom having the chance to shine brightly again. The candle then realized that its happiness came from burning brightly for others, even if it could only burn with a small flame and eventually melt away, because after all, it was a candle. 21. What children learn. Children who live among critics learn to criticize. Children who live in a hostile environment tend to fight. Children who live in fear learn to be anxious. Children who experience suffering learn empathy. Children who are surrounded by jealousy learn what it means to be ambitious. Children who live in a tolerant atmosphere learn patience. Children who are encouraged learn to trust. Children who receive timely praise learn to appreciate what's around them. Children who live with pride learn to strive. Children who live in a sharing environment learn to be generous. Children who grow up with honesty and fairness learn truth and justice. Children who live in happiness learn that the world is a good place to be. 22. The Candle of Hope. There was a man who was very poor and made a living by making and selling candles. However, hardly anyone bought his candles. He was not very sociable, so as time went on, he became more and more isolated from everyone. Every evening he would close his doors, turn off the lights, confine himself inside his house, and quietly lament his fate. Gradually, he reached a point of despair. He thought it might be better to just end his life. One evening, he decided to go through with this thought. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "You make candles. Why not light one for yourself?" Startled by the voice, which seemed to come from nowhere, he exclaimed, "Who's there?" "I am a deity. If you wish, I can light the candle of hope for you. This candle could bring you happiness." He hesitated, but eventually he agreed. He began to feel a love for life again. He spent his days taking care of that candle, making sure it burned brightly. However, inevitably, the candle began to fade. Day by day, his love for life diminished, and one day he felt completely disheartened and tired of living this way. He confined himself in his house again, crying. Of course, the hidden deity spoke up again. "Why do you weep? You did not use that candle to light others within you. That is your fault." 23. The bowl of light. It is said that every child is born with a perfect bowl of light. If you take good care of it, this light will grow into strength, and you will be able to do many useful things. However, if you feel jealous, get angry, or act cowardly, you are like someone throwing a rock into that bowl. When you do that, some of the light gets pushed out because light and rocks cannot coexist in the same space. The more rocks you throw into the bowl, the more light you force out, and eventually, you might turn into a rock yourself. Rocks do not grow or move. Eventually, you might get tired of being a rock. You have one option: to turn the bowl upside down so the rocks fall out and the light can start to grow again. There's a saying, never bring to someone else what you wouldn't want them to bring to you. If you make mistakes, you slowly lose the gift you were given at birth, and gradually, you might become someone else. There will come a time when you realize this, and remember, the light is always there in front of you. Have the courage to start over because it's never too late. 24. Obstacles. Long ago, a king wanted to test his people's character, so he dressed in common clothes and traveled far outside his palace. He placed a large rock in the middle of a busy road, not to force people to move it, but to see how they would naturally react to an unexpected obstacle. After placing the rock, he hid nearby to observe. Many people, looking wealthy and well-dressed, passed by. They complained among themselves that the rock was blocking their way and saw it as a nuisance. Some even blamed the king for not keeping the roads clear. But clearly, everyone just walked around the rock. None tried to move it. Then a poor farmer returning from the market came along with a basket full of vegetables. Seeing the rock, he set his basket down and tried to push the rock aside. Other passers-by mocked him for bothering. No one stopped to help him. After much effort, the farmer finally managed to move the rock. Upon moving it, he discovered a bag lying on the ground where the rock had been. He opened the bag and found a lot of money, realizing something many others did not. Every obstacle hides an opportunity. 25. Friends to remember in life. 1. When you meet someone you truly love, take the chance to become their partner because if they leave, it might be too late. 2. When you find a trustworthy friend, maintain a good relationship with them as finding a soulmate in life is rare. 3. When you meet someone who has helped you, show appreciation because they have changed your life. 4. When you meet someone who has loved you, smile and thank them for teaching you more about love. 5. When you encounter someone who disliked you intensely, offer a polite smile because they have made you stronger. 6. When you meet someone who has betrayed you, talk to them because if not for them, you wouldn't understand the world as you do today. 7. When you meet someone you used to love, wish them happiness because didn't you once want just that for them? 8. When you meet someone who briefly crossed your path, thank them for being a part of your life, as they add color to your diverse and rich experiences. 9. When you encounter someone who misunderstood you, take the chance to clear up the misunderstanding, as you might only have this one opportunity to explain yourself. 10. And thank your current partner for loving you, because they love you for who you are, and together you are happy. 26. Waiting for love under a tree. Every day I sit under a big tree waiting for a rabbit named Love. I heard that someone saw it running by here. As the tree grows taller and its branches fuller, I remained steadfast in my purpose. One day, a deer named Innocence passed by, and we had a chat. After it left, a dove called Joy flew by, and we danced and sang together before it flew off into the blue sky. A dog named Loyalty came by, and we played chess before it too moved on. Then a sparrow named Romance, a fox called Charm, and an antelope known as Gentle also came by. We all had joyful conversations before they each went their way. I'm still here, waiting for that rabbit, but it seems nowhere to be found. Finally, a squirrel named Hope brought me news about the rabbit Love. It said, "Love has been here many times already." I replied, "That can't be. I've been waiting right here." Hope then told me that while I was talking with Innocence, Joy, Loyalty, Romance, Charm, and Gentle, Love was also right beside me, but I just didn't realize it. 27. Tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. USA, 1971. In a remote mountainous county in a small unnamed town, a young man was sentenced to prison. The police had proved his crime, and 3 years seemed enough time for him to amend his wrongs. However, Mary, his fiancée, did not believe it. On the day of the trial, despite the young man constantly looking back for her, she was absent. Before boarding the bus for prisoners, he managed to send Mary a letter and then left. He didn't see her hidden in the back, crying and clutching the paper that briefly read, "I know I don't deserve your love. I also don't expect you to love me after all this. But if you forgive me, please tie a yellow ribbon around the only old oak tree in the town square on the day I return. And if there's no ribbon, I'll leave forever and never bother you again." During his 3 years in prison, no matter how much the young man longed for her, Mary remained out of touch. In the first year, he thought maybe she couldn't accept that her soon-to-be husband was a criminal. In the second year, he asked people to check on her, only hearing rumors that she had gone far away, and no one knew when she would return. By the end of his time, he stopped thinking about the yellow ribbon or even Mary. On his release day, he decided to take a bus straight to the city instead of passing through the town square as planned. One bus came and went, then another, and he didn't board. Finally, when the last bus passed, he slowly walked to the square. His mind told him to go the other way, but his heart led him forward. And that afternoon, hundreds of townspeople were surprised to see a young man weeping under a brightly glowing oak tree adorned with hundreds of yellow ribbons. 28. The Law of the Garbage Truck. One day, I hopped into a taxi to head to the airport. As we were driving in the right lane, suddenly a black SUV rushed out from a parking lot ahead. The taxi driver slammed on the brakes and barely avoided a collision. The SUV driver turned around and yelled at us. The taxi driver just smiled and waved back. I thought he was being really nice. So I asked him, "Why are you so calm? That guy almost wrecked your car and we could have ended up in the hospital." That's when the taxi driver taught me what I now call the law of the garbage truck. He explained that some people are like garbage trucks. They go around full of garbage, frustration, anger, and disappointment. As their garbage piles up, they need a place to dump it, and sometimes they'll dump it on you. Don't take it personally. Just smile, wave, wish them well, and move on. Don't spread their garbage at work, on the streets, or bring it home. Successful people do not let garbage trucks ruin their day. Life is too short to live with regrets. So, love those who treat you well and pray for those who don't. Our lives are only 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
29. The Opposite of Love, a Lesson in Love and Memory. During a lecture on novels in a class for young writers, a professor suddenly stopped and asked the students, What is the opposite of love? Hate, they replied. The professor paced back and forth, thoughtful. He set down his lecture notes on the desk and said, "Imagine this. You're in love, and then you break up. 50 years later, you're 70 years old and you bump into your ex on a walk one afternoon. She stares at you and says, 'Mr. A, I hate you.' If that happens, you should be happy for yourself." "Why?" the students asked. "Because you're lucky to have someone who has hated you for half a century." "Lucky? That's absurd." "Calm down and think about it," the professor continued. "Hate can captivate feelings just like love and affection do, meaning someone has been thinking about you. Having someone hate you for 50 years means they've been thinking about you all that time. That's quite rare. You are fortunate, aren't you? What's truly scary is meeting your ex again, asking her, 'Mrs. B, do you remember me?' And she just stares blankly at you and says, 'Sir, you look somewhat familiar. Who are you?'" The class burst into laughter, finding the fictional story amusing yet slightly awkward. The professor concluded, "The opposite of love isn't hate." The class agreed with the professor. The opposite of love is forgetting. The best way to get revenge is to forget and move on. 30. The Sword of King Dionysius. Once upon a time, Dionysius ruled over Syracuse, the richest part of the kingdom of Sicily. He lived in a magnificent palace, filled with expensive items and many attendants. Dionysius's power and wealth made many people in Syracuse envious, including Damocles, one of his trusted advisors. Damocles often complained to the king, "You're so lucky. You have everything anyone could wish for. You must be the happiest person in the world." Dionysius grew tired of hearing this every day. One day he said to his advisor, "Why do you always think I'm happier than everyone else?" "But it's true, my king," Damocles replied. "Look at the power and wealth you hold. You never have to worry about anything. Could life get any better?" "All right then. Tomorrow you can take my place for a day." "Oh, I've never even dreamed of such an opportunity," Damocles exclaimed joyfully. "Just being in your position for one day would make me the happiest." So, the next day, Damocles was led to the palace. By Dionysius's orders, the servants treated him as they would their king. They dressed him in royal robes and placed the king's crown on his head. Damocles sat down at the large dining table, and a feast of fine foods was served. He couldn't have been happier. Rare wines, fragrant flowers, exquisite fruits, fine oils, and lively music were all brought to him. Damocles relaxed on a soft cushion, enjoying boundless happiness. "This is the life," he sighed to Dionysius, who was sitting across the table. "I've never experienced such a wonderful life before." As he raised a glass of wine to his lips and looked up at the ceiling, what was swinging above him pointed straight at his head. Damocles froze. His smile faded. His face turned pale and his hands trembled. Now he couldn't care less about the fine food or music. The only thing he thought about was getting out of that seat as quickly as possible. Above Damocles' head hung a sword suspended by a thin thread, its sharp blade pointing directly at the top of his head. Suddenly Damocles tried to jump from the chair and run away, but he immediately abandoned the idea, fearing that any slight movement might snap the thread and cause the sword to fall. Damocles sat as still as a statue. "What's wrong?" Dionysius asked. "You seem tense." "The sword! The sword up there!" Damocles whispered. "Do you see it?" "Of course," Dionysius replied. "I see it every day. It always hangs over my head and could fall at any moment. But it's just a part of what I set up to remind myself of the hidden dangers, like betrayal from advisors, the people turning against me, enemy invasions, or my own mistakes. If you want power, you must first learn to accept all the dangers and risks. Understand?" "Yes, my king. I understand now," Damocles answered. I didn't realize you had to worry about so much. Please take back your position, and I will go home." After that, Damocles never again wanted to trade places with the king for even a moment. Try putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their deeper reasons before getting upset with them. 31. A valuable lesson. Once upon a time, there was an extraordinary painter named Ranga. Throughout his career, he created many incredible masterpieces that amazed everyone who saw them. As time passed and he aged, Ranga decided to start an art class to teach others and find a disciple to carry on his legacy. He often told his students, "You will only succeed if you satisfy me with your skills and understanding." Therefore, he rarely praised anyone and did not specify when the course would end. Ranga dedicated himself to teaching his students unique evaluation methods. He never exaggerated the importance of the paintings or fame, but always emphasized how his students handled life. Among many students, Rajiv was the most talented, hardworking, and creative, which allowed him to learn much faster than his peers. Ranga was very pleased with him. One day, Ranga told Rajiv, "I am proud of the progress you have made, but before I acknowledge you as a talented painter, I want you to create a painting that everyone finds beautiful and praises." Rajiv obeyed, worked diligently day and night, and presented a wonderful painting to Ranga. Ranga then instructed him to place the painting in the main square and write beneath it that the artist would appreciate it if anyone could point out any flaws by marking an X on them. 2 days later, Ranga asked Rajiv to retrieve the painting. Rajiv was disappointed to see it covered in X marks. Ranga smiled reassuringly and encouraged Rajiv to try again. Rajiv then painted another masterpiece and showed it to Ranga. This time, Ranga suggested changing the message beneath the painting. He told Rajiv to leave paint and brushes next to the painting in the square and ask people to correct any mistakes they found using those tools. After 2 days, when Rajiv retrieved the painting, he was delighted to find it untouched and confidently brought it to his teacher. Ranga said, "Today, you have succeeded. Being skilled in art alone is not enough. You must also understand that people will hastily judge the moment they get a chance, even if they know nothing about it. If you always let the world judge you, you will always fail. People are quick to criticize without considering responsibility or seriousness. They marked your first painting with X's because they faced no consequences and found it a mindless, enjoyable task. But when asked to correct the errors, no one did because they were afraid to expose their lack of knowledge. So, protect your hard work from being easily swayed by others' opinions. Judge yourself, and of course, don't judge others too hastily. Live your life for yourself and care about what truly matters to you. Take good advice into account and ignore the rest." 32. Letter to you, the girl who often feels insecure. You always feel insecure because you think you're not beautiful. I need a woman with a beautiful heart and soul, not just superficial beauty. Your eyes have a hint of sad sunshine. I only see a brilliant sunrise in those eyes. Your hands are rough and calloused. To me, they feel like the warmth of an amazing wife and mother. I am tall and you are short. Great. If the sky ever falls, at least I can use my height to protect you. You cry often. Your tears are so kind they could end a drought. You cause inconveniences. It helps me practice the patience and forgiveness I've only read about in theory. My dear, even though you're not perfect, I love you and all that makes you who you are. To me, you are a girl with enough courage to embrace love, enough strength to forgive, and enough generosity to share happiness with me and those around us. If you were perfect, you might never know what dreams or hope are. You wouldn't need to strive for a better tomorrow. You would never experience the joy of being loved. You wouldn't know what you lack or deeply desire. Letter to you, the girl who often feels insecure. 33. Balloons of hope. Open your heart. A black boy is playing on a grassy field. Across the street, a man is gently releasing balloons into the sky. The balloons are colorful: blue, red, purple, yellow, and even black. The boy looks delighted and runs up to the man, asking quietly, "Sir, can the black balloons fly as high as the others?" The man turns around, quickly hiding tears about to trickle down his cheeks, and points to the balloons, now tiny dots in the sky, replying, "Of course, the black balloons can fly as high as any other color, and so can you." The boy beams a radiant smile and thanks the man. Black, yellow, red, no matter the color, they are all just balloons. 34. Black or white? When I was in elementary school, I once had a heated argument with a classmate. Honestly, I don't remember what we were fighting about, but I'll never forget the lesson I learned that day. During the argument, I was adamant that I was right and he was wrong, and he was just as insistent that he was right and I was wrong. Our teacher caught us and took us to the teacher's room. She told us to sit on opposite sides of a table that had a large plastic ball on it. The ball was pitch black. Yet, when the teacher asked, "What color is the ball?" my friend answered, "White." I couldn't believe what he was saying. Was he blind or just messing with me? So I blurted out, "It's black, you dummy." We started arguing again about the color of the ball. Then our teacher asked us to switch places. This time, when she asked me, "What color is the ball?" I had to say, "White." The ball was painted 2 different colors on each side. From where I initially sat, it looked black, but from my friend's side, it was white. Yet, we had been so sure of ourselves, arguing without understanding why the other held a different view. Never assume you are completely right. You have to put yourself in someone else's shoes and view situations from their perspective to truly understand them. 35. Topsy-turvy. When I first started walking as a child, falling down was inevitable. Each time I fell, I would usually just lie there on the floor waiting for my mom to come and comfort me or give me a treat before I would agree to get up. There was one time when I fell pretty hard, and even my mom's comforting couldn't stop my crying. This time, it wasn't because I was being fussy. I was genuinely in pain. Suddenly, Mom stood up, opened a tiny cupboard where she kept various little things, and brought out a roly-poly toy. She placed the roly-poly on the ground, pushed it so it rolled over, and said to me, "Look, honey, even though it's smaller than you, every time it's pushed down, it gets right back up. Look at your little toy." I watched the roly-poly. Indeed, whenever it was knocked over, it would spring right back up. I was fascinated by the new toy and forgot about my pain. My mom watched me with a gentle smile and said, "See, no matter what, the roly-poly stands back up. It's so resilient, and I believe my daughter is just as tough." I stopped crying and kept my eyes wide open, watching the roly-poly wobble but never stay down. Back then, I tried to be like the roly-poly. Every time I stumbled, I made an effort to get right back up. My mom often called me her darling roly-poly girl. Now I don't have my mom by my side. I've grown up and have to take care of everything myself. Life isn't always as we wish. Sometimes when I feel tired or down, I feel like giving up on everything. But the image of the roly-poly and my mom's encouraging words always come back to me. And I get back up again. Nothing can knock me down for good, because I've resolved to be a roly-poly. 36. The Golden Window. Charles lives with his parents on a small farm. Every day he wakes up before the sun rises. He loves watching the early morning, especially the golden window of a farm not too far from his family's. He thinks it's the most beautiful window in the world. From a distance, it looks magnificent, almost as if it were made of gold. The paint on that house, too. It looks so glamorous. Surely it must be a wealthy family's home. Let's see. A golden window must mean there's a brand new, fragrant curtain inside, not old like the ones at his house. What else? The fireplace. Right. Next to the fireplace, there must be a soft, cushioned chair, the perfect spot that Charles has longed for. He let his imagination soar. Then one day, Charles decided to go see his dream house for himself. The closer he got to the house, the more excited he became, but everything turned out to be completely different from what he had imagined. It was just an ordinary house. Even the paint was old, and the golden paint around the window was scratched and worn. Filled with disappointment, Charles didn't notice a boy playing in the yard until he called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just walking around here," Charles replied awkwardly. "Where are you from?" "Over there," Charles vaguely pointed. At this, the boy seemed very eager and pulled Charles to one side and asked, "Hey, do you know the house over there?" Charles looked where the boy pointed and was shocked because it wasn't some strange house. It was his own. He had no idea that from a distance, under the sunlight, it looked so beautiful. The boy exclaimed excitedly, "See, that house with the golden window, it must be beautiful inside, right? They probably have a big fireplace and a comfy armchair next to it, too." 37. The Two Boxes. Once upon a time, there lived a poor grandfather and his grandson in a small hut, barely making ends meet. The grandson often felt sad because he didn't have nice clothes like other kids in the neighborhood and was often mocked by them. Especially during Christmas, they never had a Christmas tree or any gifts in their humble home. On the Christmas, when the boy turned 10, just like every other year, he had no hopes for anything special. But his kind grandfather gave him 2 boxes as a gift, one black box and one wrapped in shiny gold paper. The boxes were placed side by side on top of a cupboard. The grandfather told him that the boxes needed to stay there to remain magical and then said, "When you're sad, sit by the black box, and when you're happy, sit by the gold one." Though the boxes were empty and not a typical gift, they became a source of comfort during Christmas. The boy did as his grandfather advised, pouring all his sorrows and joys into the 2 boxes. He felt happy speaking next to the gold box, as his happiness seemed to multiply and linger. And when he was sad and talked to the black box, his sorrows seemed to diminish. Eventually, the boxes helped alleviate the boy's feelings of loneliness and frustration. Out of curiosity, the boy one day bravely opened both boxes to look inside. At the bottom of the black box, he found a hole. "Grandpa, where have all my sorrows gone?" the boy asked. "They've fallen out and flown away, my child," his grandfather replied. Then he continued, "And the gold box isn't broken, so it keeps your joy and good luck with you forever. Have you found your own special boxes yet?" 38. Freckles. An elderly woman was holding hands with a little boy as they waited in line at the park. The boy's face was covered in tiny freckles, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. Many other children were also in line, eager to have their faces painted to look like Native Americans or aliens. "You have so many freckles, there's no more space left on your face to paint." A little girl standing behind the boy exclaimed loudly. Embarrassed, the boy looked down. Seeing this, his grandmother sat down next to him. "Why are you sad? I love your freckles. When I was young, I always wished I had freckles too," she said, gently stroking his cheek with her wrinkled fingers. "Freckles are beautiful. I'm sure the artist will love them too." The boy smiled. "Really, Grandma?" "Really," she replied. "See, try to find something more beautiful than your freckles." The boy looked at his grandmother, thought for a moment, and then whispered, "The wrinkles, Grandma." If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 39. The 80th floor. Two brothers lived on the 80th floor of a high-rise building. One day, after work, they found the elevator was out of service, so they had to take the stairs to their apartment. By the 20th floor, though a bit tired, the real nuisance was the bags they were carrying. They decided to leave the bags behind and retrieve them the next day. Feeling lighter and happier, they energetically made it to the 40th floor. But from there, the younger brother started feeling his knees weakening and the mood soured, leading to a petty argument. Despite this, they pushed on for another 20 floors. Reaching the 60th floor sign, they rejoiced, knowing only a quarter of the journey was left. They managed to calm down and stopped bickering to complete the climb. Step by step, they finally reached their destination. Standing at their apartment door, they were overjoyed until they realized the keys were in the bags left on the 20th floor. Life often resembles this story. Everyone has to climb their own steps in life. Some reach the 80th floor, others not as high. Early on, we study and live under pressure, meeting the expectations of parents, teachers, and peers. We seldom get to do what we really want. In these years, many dreams form, but realizing them requires hard work, knowledge, and sometimes sacrifices. At 20, we revel in newfound freedom, feeling encumbered by past dreams and wanting to shed them to pursue fleeting whims and joys that life brings. By 40, we often feel dissatisfied, prone to complaining and criticizing others. At 60, realizing time is limited, people tend to calm down and quietly live out their remaining years. Then, when we think nothing can bother us anymore, regret seeps in for dreams not achieved or abandoned decades ago. Hold on to your dreams and the valuable experiences from your 20s. Carry them throughout your life, so you never have to regret what you've done. Learn to forgive instead of constantly criticizing and complaining about others. Help people, and be grateful for the chance to live this life. 40. Actions and intentions. In the winter of 1990, I was invited to the Capitol to appear on a TV talk show. On the evening before the filming day, while driving back to my hotel, I saw something. There on the sidewalk, lying on the cold, thick snow, was a man sleeping under just a piece of cardboard. I was deeply moved to see his bare feet, without shoes or socks. At that moment, I thought about stopping my car to help him, but I was unsure about what I was about to do. Then, the traffic light turned green. Life seemed to demand that I keep moving, so I pressed on the gas. Back at the hotel, I quickly forgot about the man on the street. The next day, as I was having coffee waiting for my turn in the grand lobby, all the important people had left the lobby, leaving only me and the janitor. I had seen him quietly doing his daily job during my stay. He never said much besides, "Good morning," or "Can I help you with anything, sir?" He always had a smile for everyone. Chatting with him, I asked how he was feeling today. He told me he had just biked around in the snow and felt sorry for himself, until he saw a man sleeping on a street corner under a cardboard blanket with no shoes. I felt a lump in my throat as he described how he had circled back several times to buy the poor man a pair of shoes and socks. While listening to the janitor's story, I suddenly remembered a familiar poster. It depicted a child holding a flower, trying to reach up to give it to an adult, with the caption, "A small act means more than grand intentions." I stood there, wishing I had been the one to buy shoes and socks for the man by the roadside when I was called into the studio. After the filming, I walked down that road again to find the poor man, but he was already gone. 41. Facing criticism and rumors. First story. One leisurely day, Emperor Tang Taizong asked his close official, Hua Jingxun, Why do I hear so much criticism about you, even though you seem like a decent person? Hua Jingxun replied, Your Majesty, spring rain is like oil, and while farmers rejoice as it nourishes the fields, travelers curse it for making the roads slippery. The bright autumn moon is like a mirror hanging in the night sky, which poets celebrate for the chance to enjoy and recite poetry, but thieves despise because it makes hiding difficult. Nature does not favor anyone, yet it is still blamed and hated in this world. I am not a perfect person, so how can I avoid criticism? Thus, I think one should calmly consider the rumors and not rush to believe them. If a king believes the rumors, his officials suffer. If parents believe them, their children are abandoned. If spouses believe them, families break apart. Rumors are more poisonous than snakes and sharper than swords, killing without drawing blood. Second story. Once, while the Buddha was teaching in a region where many followed Brahmanism, Brahmin priests saw their followers converting to Buddhism and insulted the Buddha on his path. The Buddha walked calmly, ignoring their curses. Angered, they stopped him and asked, Are you deaf? I am not deaf. Then why don't you respond when I curse you? Brahmin follower, if you host a party and your guests refuse the gifts you offer, who ends up keeping them? I keep them. Similarly, if you curse me and I don't accept it, it remains with you. Buddhist scriptures say that when a wicked person curses a virtuous one, and the virtuous person does not accept it, it is like the wicked person spitting upwards. The spit does not reach heaven, but falls back on his own face. Accepting it brings pain. Rejecting it brings peace and happiness. Therefore, if someone speaks ill of you, do not accept it and you will remain at peace. According to Buddhism, verbal actions are among the heaviest deeds one can commit. The wounds you inflict on another's body may heal, but those caused by words are uncertain of healing. So, be careful with your words. Do not unintentionally create rumors or blame others for their faults because, as the saying goes, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. 42. 8 Principles for a Happier You. Optimistic people don't have superpowers. They're different because they always focus on the positive in tough situations. Instead of letting worries control them, positive thinkers take charge of their lives by managing stress and striving to improve themselves daily. Don't assume the worst. Problems often won't arise if we don't dwell on them. Instead of getting lost in pointless questions like, what if they don't like me? Optimistic, positive people think more practically. Today is going to be a busy day for me. This means that while ordinary people may suffer from their own imagined scenarios, optimists savor the present and face reality. Don't compare yourself to others. Positive people understand that everyone is unique and has their own path. They believe in what they are doing and have. Instead of focusing on others' stories, they concentrate on personal growth. Don't exaggerate small mistakes. Positive people don't see failures as something horrible to be avoided at all costs. In fact, failure is a normal part of life that challenges individuals and offers valuable lessons. Viewing failure this way helps optimists rarely fall into despair. Don't expect life to be perfect. Optimists never mistake life for being perfect because it's unrealistic. Instead of waiting for a perfect day to do something, positive people take action today and in the moment. Waiting for something perfect is indeed a futile wait. Don't let others' moods control you. Positive people don't let negative thoughts drag their mood down. When they feel down, they surround themselves with positive, cheerful, and optimistic individuals. If negative thoughts creep in, they quickly remind themselves, come on, being happy or sad is my decision. Don't get bored. Boredom is the enemy of creativity, passion, and enthusiasm. Therefore, positive people are always excited about everything around them. They explore the world with the curiosity and enthusiasm of youth. Don't see problems as problems. The word problem hardly exists for positive people. They believe that every challenge also brings an opportunity that hasn't yet been discovered. Positive people embrace difficulties to challenge themselves and grow. Don't blame others. Clinging to something all your life won't let you walk on your own. Just like a child falls many times before learning to walk, positive people don't use excuses to justify failures or mistakes. They acknowledge that they can make mistakes, but they are ready to face them without blaming circumstances. 43. The best bread. A homeless man who hadn't eaten for days wandered the streets. As he reached a corner, he smelled the delicious aroma of fresh bread coming from a house. It was his lucky day. This was a bakery. "Please, could you spare a piece of bread for a starving man?" he begged the bakery owner. "Oh, you're a wise one. You've come to the right place," the baker said proudly. "How did you know about my bakery? Who told you? Surely it's because my bread is so well known. I'll let you in on a secret. My bread is made from a family recipe that goes back 7 generations. It's all written down in that red leather book on the shelf over there. Can you see it?" The homeless man managed a weak smile. "Yes, but, sir, I'm very hungry. I haven't eaten anything in days. I'm really begging for your help. Just a slice of bread would be enough." Ignoring the desperate look on the man's face, the owner continued to preach about his dough-kneading secrets. He pulled the homeless man closer to the oven. Fresh batches of bread were coming out, crispy and fragrant. "See? How beautiful and fragrant the bread is. Baking is an art. To make good bread, you must love the craft." "But, sir, I'm hungry. Please," the homeless man stammered. "You must understand, people need many things, but bread is fundamental. No one can live without bread." "That's exactly why I'm knocking on your door," the homeless man interjected timidly. "Hold on. Let me finish, but not everyone is as ethical as I am. Come here." The baker pulled the homeless man to the door and continued. "See, this whole street, every house has a bread oven, but don't trust them. Some add poor quality flour, some use too much salt, others overbake their bread, and yet they claim what they make is bread." "Sir, I'm just asking for a piece of bread to eat," the homeless man repeated wearily. "But what I'm about to tell you is the most important," the bakery owner continued, waving his hands. Suddenly, the homeless man turned and slowly walked away. "Hey, don't you want to try the best bread in town, made from a 7-generation family recipe?" the baker called after him. "No, thank you. Bread from elsewhere might be saltier, made with worse flour, even burnt, but it fills my stomach. At your place, only my ears are full." 44. The roots of growth. People's strength is shaped by their very weaknesses. As a child, I had a neighbor everyone called Dr. Gibbs. He was unlike any doctor I had ever known. He was simple and kind, especially towards us mischievous kids. Outside of his life-saving work, Dr. Gibbs loved to garden. He aimed to turn his 10-acre plot into a forest. This gentle doctor had some interesting theories about planting that were quite the opposite of what most people believed. He never watered his newly growing plants, explaining that watering would spoil them and weaken the next generation of plants. Instead, they should learn to face hardship. Any plant that couldn't withstand this would be removed early on. He taught me how to water trees with shallow roots, so they'd have to stretch deeper into the ground to find water. No wonder I never saw him water plants. He planted an oak tree, and instead of watering it each morning, he would take a rolled-up newspaper and smack it. Whack, whack, whack. When I asked why he did this, he said it was to make it pay attention. Dr. Gibbs passed away 2 years after I moved away from home. Now, looking at the rows of trees at his place, I can almost see him planting them 25 years ago. Those trees, once slender, now stand tall and robust, like young adults proud and ready to face life's challenges. Years later, I also planted 2 trees. In the hot summer, I watered them, and in the cold winter, I treated them and prayed for them. They grew nearly 30 feet tall in 2 years, but were always reliant on my care. Just a gust of cold wind would make them shiver and drop branches. They looked just like weaklings. This was in stark contrast to Dr. Gibbs's forest. It seems adversity and scarcity were more beneficial to them than abundance. Every night before bed, I visit my 2 sons' room and watch them sleep peacefully. Watching their small bodies breathe, I always pray for them to have a comfortable life. But recently, I've thought it might be time to change that prayer. I now pray for them to be stronger, to endure the inevitable storms of life. Innocence alone can't shield them from hardships. Struggles and difficulties are always present. Life is never smooth. I hope the roots of my children grow deep so they can draw strength from the hidden springs of eternal life. Looking back, I've prayed too much for peace, but seldom have those wishes been fulfilled. What we need is to hope for strong bodies and resilient wills, so when the heat scorches or the storms hit, we will never be knocked down.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
45. Buddha's teachings on loyalty in love. Late one night in a temple, a man knelt before Buddha seeking guidance on love. Man, Honorable Buddha, I am married but deeply in love with another woman. I'm not sure what to do. Buddha, can you be sure that this woman is the last and only one you will ever love? Man, yes, I believe so. Buddha, should you divorce and marry her then? Man, but my current wife is kind, virtuous, and gentle. Would leaving her be cruel and immoral? Buddha, staying in a marriage without love is what's truly cruel and immoral. Since you no longer love your wife, it's right to leave. Man, but my wife still loves me deeply. Buddha, then she is happy. Man, if I leave her for another, she will be devastated. How can that be happiness? Buddha, in the marriage, your wife still loves you, but you've lost your love for her. Since you love another, the loss is yours, and you are the one who will suffer. Man, by leaving my wife and marrying another, she loses me and remains in pain. Buddha, you're mistaken. You were the one she truly loved in the marriage. If you cease to exist for her, she will find true love elsewhere because her capacity for real love in the marriage hasn't vanished. Therefore, she will ultimately be happy, and you will be the one in pain. Man, my wife once said she would only ever love me. She won't love someone else. Buddha, haven't you said the same? Man, Buddha, now look at the 3 candles in front of you. Which one shines the brightest? Man, I can't tell. They all seem equally bright. Buddha, these candles represent 3 women. The one you're currently in love with is among them. With millions of women in the world, if you can't determine which candle burns brightest, how can you be sure this woman is the last and only one for you? Man, Buddha, hold one candle close and see which shines brightest. Man, naturally, the one right before me shines brightest. Buddha, put it back and tell me which one shines brightest now. Man, honestly, I still can't tell. Buddha, the candle you just held is like the woman you're currently in love with. Love emerges from the heart. When you focus on it, it seems the brightest. When it's back in its place, the feeling fades. Your supposed final and only love is an illusion, as fleeting as a flower in a mirror or the moon reflected in water. Man, I understand now. Buddha isn't telling me to rush into a divorce, but is helping me see the truth. Buddha. Seeing clearly means beyond mere words. Go now. Man. I now realize who I truly love. It is my current wife. Buddha. Amitabha Buddha. Conclusion. True happiness doesn't wait for a future life or need to be sought elsewhere. It exists now and here. Everyone has a source of genuine happiness, but often people overlook this, chasing after fleeting joys instead. 46. The Old Fisherman. Our house is located directly opposite the entrance to Johns Hopkins Hospital. My family lives on the ground floor and we rent out the rooms upstairs to patients. One evening, while I was cooking soup for dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find an extremely unattractive man standing there. He was hunched and wrinkled, barely taller than my 8-year-old son. His face was really what was terrifying, though, red and misshapen. Yet, his voice was very kind. "Hello. I was wondering if you have any rooms available just for tonight. I've come from the East Coast for treatment and don't have a bus back until tomorrow morning." He explained that he had been searching for a room since noon but found nothing available. "I think it's because of my face. I know it looks frightening, but the doctor says a few more treatments should help." I hesitated, but his next words convinced me. "I can sleep in a chair in the lobby if needed, as my bus leaves very early." I insisted on finding him a proper bed instead of letting him sleep in a chair. I went back to my kitchen to finish dinner and then invited him to join us. "Oh, no need. I have plenty of food," he said, showing a brown paper bag. After dinner, we chatted in the hallway and I quickly saw that inside this small man was a vast heart. He spoke of his fishing job, supporting his daughter, 5 grandchildren, and a son-in-law who was completely disabled after an accident. There was no bitterness in his voice, only gratitude for his painless condition and thanks to God for giving him the strength to continue living. At bedtime, I set up a foldable bed in the children's room for him. The next morning, he had neatly folded the bed linens and was waiting in the lobby. He declined breakfast and hesitantly asked, "Can I come back here for my next treatment? I won't be any trouble. I can sleep in the chair." He paused and then added, "Your kids make me feel at home. Adults might find my face upsetting, but the kids don't seem to mind at all." I told him he was always welcome back. The second time he came in the morning, he brought us gifts, a huge fish and a jar filled with the largest oysters I'd ever seen. He said he had just shelled them that morning to keep them fresh. I don't know what time he woke up to do all that since his bus had left at 4 a.m. Throughout the years he stayed with us, he never came without bringing something. Sometimes, I even received these gifts through the mail. The post office was quite a distance from his house, and he spent a lot of money sending fresh items, making his gifts even more valuable. Once a neighbor said, "You let that scary old man stay overnight?" I turned him away. "You might lose customers if you let people like that stay in your home." We might have lost a customer or two, but once they knew about him, those thoughts surely faded. My family is forever grateful for knowing him. We've learned that in life, you don't always encounter luck. What's important is to live optimistically and be open to whatever comes your way, instead of just complaining. 47. A life lesson from a cow. Sometimes what you think is true really isn't. It's just an assumption based on incomplete experiences that you haven't questioned. Long ago, there was a wise and experienced teacher who wanted to share the secrets of a happy and prosperous life with one of his students. Aware of the struggles and barriers many face in seeking happiness, he believed the first lesson should be to understand why many people lead average, unremarkable lives. After all, he thought, too many people, both men and women, seem unable to overcome obstacles that prevent success and settle for a life of scarcity and hardship. He knew that for a young person to truly absorb this vital lesson, They should witness firsthand what happens if we let mediocrity control our lives. To teach these important lessons, the teacher decided to travel with his student to a poor village in the region. The scene of suffering and desolation was everywhere, and the villagers seemed to have resigned themselves to their fate. Upon arrival, the teacher asked his student to find the poorest family in the area where they could stay overnight. They walked to the edge of the town and stopped in front of the most dilapidated hut they had ever seen. The structure, on the outermost fringe of a few rural homes, was obviously the abode of the village's poorest family. The walls stood as if by a miracle, threatening to collapse at any moment. The makeshift roof barely held back the rain, and all kinds of debris leaned against the walls, adding to the decrepit look. The homeowner, alerted by a child about the presence of the two strangers, came out and warmly welcomed them. "Hello, dear friend," the teacher responded. "Would you mind if we two weary travelers stayed here for the night? It's cramped, but you're welcome to stay if you don't mind." When they entered, they were shocked to see such a tiny space, barely larger than a small room, home to 8 people. The father, mother, 4 children, and 2 elderly grandparents all tried to make room for each other in this cramped space. Their emaciated bodies and tattered clothes were clear evidence of their daily struggle for survival. Their sad faces and stooped figures showed how poverty had taken over their lives and souls. Despite looking around, the guests wondered if there was anything of value in this miserable place. There was nothing. However, upon leaving, they realized they were wrong. Surprisingly, this family owned something quite special given their circumstances: a cow. The cow was unremarkable, but their daily life seemed to revolve around it. Feed the cow. Don't let it go thirsty. Tie it up securely. Don't forget to lead it to graze. Milk the cow. Indeed, the cow played a crucial role in this family, although the little milk it provided was barely enough to get them through each day. Yet, the cow served a greater purpose. It was the only thing keeping them from total despair. In a place where everything was scarce, owning such a valuable asset earned them respect, if not envy, from their neighbors. And there, amidst the dirt and chaos, the teacher and student lay down to spend the night. The next morning, before dawn could break, they left quietly so as not to wake the others. The student looked back, wanting to engrave the scene of desolation into his memory. Deep down, he couldn't understand why his teacher had brought him here. However, before reaching the main road, the elderly teacher whispered, "It's time for you to understand what brought us to this wretched place." During their brief visit, they had witnessed a life nearly abandoned, but the students still didn't understand why this family was so impoverished. What had forced them to remain here? The teacher slowly walked towards the cow, tied to a shaky fence post not far from the house. When he was about a step away, the teacher pulled out a dagger he carried with him. The student felt uneasy. As the teacher raised his hand, the student was horrified to realize what his teacher was about to do. He couldn't believe his eyes as the teacher swiftly slit the cow's throat. The fatal cut made the animal collapse. "Look what you've done," the student asked in a whisper, pained and afraid to wake the others. "How could you kill that poor creature? What kind of lesson is this that would plunge that family into total ruin? This was all they had. What will they do now?" Unmoved by his student's distress and ignoring his questions, the teacher walked away, leaving the horrifying scene behind, oblivious to the disaster the family would face now that they had lost their cow. The student followed, still full of questions, and they continued on their way. The family was left to face an unstable, challenging situation, potentially even more impoverished than before. In the days that followed, the student was haunted by the terrible thought that the family would starve to death without their cow. Could he draw any other conclusion from the loss of their only source of livelihood? For months, He agonized over these thoughts and the memory of that sorrowful morning. A year passed, and one afternoon the elderly teacher suggested they return to the village to see what had happened to the family. Just the mention of an event that seemed to have been forgotten was enough to reawaken the vivid memory of the lesson that, to this day, he still couldn't fully comprehend. Once again, the student's mind was flooded with thoughts about the destitute family and his role in their fate. What had happened to them? Had they survived that severe blow? Had they started a new life? Could he face them after what his teacher had done? Despite the turmoil in his mind, the student reluctantly agreed and joined the trip that might shed light on the matter that had troubled him all year. After several days, they reached the old village. They searched in vain for the hut they had stayed in the previous year. The surroundings looked the same, but the wretched place they had spent the night was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a charming, newly built house stood on the old site. They stopped and looked around to make sure they were in the right place. The student feared that the cow's death was such a severe blow that a destitute family like them couldn't have survived. Perhaps they had been forced to leave, and a wealthier family had been fortunate enough to take over the land and build the new house. What other possibility could there be? Surely shame had driven them away. As these thoughts swirled in his head, the student hesitated between wanting to know what had happened to the family and the unappealing task of confirming his worst fears. But eventually, he decided to find out. He needed to know. So, he knocked on the door of the house and waited. In a moment, a cheerful man stepped out of the house. At first, the student didn't recognize him. But then he couldn't hide his astonishment when he realized it was the man who had sheltered them last year. It was clearly the same person, but something was very different about him. He was dressed in clean, neatly groomed clothes. He had a smile on his lips and a sparkle in his eyes. Clearly, something significant had happened in his life. The young man could hardly believe his eyes. How could this be possible? What could have happened in just 1 year? He eagerly greeted the man and immediately queried him about the stroke of luck that had come to him and his family. "Just last year, when we stopped by here," he said, "you seemed to be living in a state of misery and hopelessness. Please tell me what happened that changed your circumstances so much. What brought you such good fortune?" Ignoring the fact that it was these two guests who had killed the cow, the man invited them inside and began to tell the remarkable story of his family. The story would forever change the life of our young friend. The homeowner explained that it was a strange coincidence that on the very day the teacher and student left, some malicious person, perhaps jealous of his family's rare asset, had heartlessly slit the throat of that poor animal. "I must admit," the man said, "our first reaction was utter despair and agony. For a long time, the milk from that cow was our only source of livelihood. Moreover, it was the only asset we had. Our lives depended on it. That cow was the center of our daily existence, honestly. Having that animal gave us a sense of security and earned us respect from our neighbors. Not long after that tragic day, we realized that if we didn't do something, we would only fall into a worse situation. We had hit rock bottom when we lost that animal. We also needed to eat and provide for our children. And then we cleared a piece of land behind the house, planting a few vegetables and fruits. That's how we got by in the first few months. After a while, we noticed that the garden provided more food than we needed. If we could sell some to the people around us, we could buy more seeds. So, not long after, we not only had enough to eat, but also to sell at the market." "And then it happened," the man exclaimed. "For the first time in our lives, we had money to buy food and clothes, and we saw hope for a new life, a life we had never even dreamed could become reality. We built this small house last month. It seems like losing the cow opened our eyes to a different, more promising life." The young man was amazed to hear the story. Finally, He understood the lesson his respected teacher had wanted to teach him. Suddenly, everything became clear. The death of the cow wasn't the end for them, as he had feared, but had opened up a new life with better opportunities. The homeowner invited the teacher and student to stay the night, and they gladly accepted. The next morning, they said goodbye to the homeowner and his family and continued their journey. The teacher, who had been silent until now, asked the student, who was still amazed by what he had heard and witnessed, "Do you think that family could have achieved what they did in the past year if they still had that cow?" "Probably not," the student replied without hesitation. "Now do you understand? The cow they treasured like a treasure was the chain that bound their lives to poverty and hardship. They were convinced that the cow kept them from collapsing, but it took losing that false security for them to look in a new direction. In other words," the student continued, "the cow, the animal their neighbors considered a blessing, gave them the feeling they weren't living in poverty, but in reality, their lives were quite miserable." "That's right," the elderly teacher spoke up. "That's what happens when you believe that the little you have is already enough. Just that thought is a heavy chain preventing you from seeking better things. Satisfaction begins to destroy your life. You accept your circumstances even if you're not happy with them. You know you're not happy with your position in life, but you don't feel miserable. You're disappointed with the life you're living, but the dissatisfaction isn't strong enough for you to do something about it. Do you see how tragic that is? When you have a job you don't like, a job that doesn't even meet your minimum needs and doesn't give you any personal satisfaction or the life you want, then deciding to leave and look for another job is easy. But when the job you don't like helps you pay your debts, survive, and also enjoy a few small comforts, you easily fall into the trap of being content with the thought that at least you have something. Eventually, you justify that many people want that job but can't get it. Like the cow, that attitude always holds you back. If you don't discard it, you'll never see anything beyond what you've long known. You'll become a lifelong victim of the limits you've set in your life. It's like you're blindfolded at the starting line and praying to win the race. The student listened more and more amazed. He was fascinated by his teacher's insights and began to fully understand the issues. We all have cows in our lives. We carry the burden of mistaken beliefs, excuses, fears, and prejudices. Sadly, all the limitations we impose on ourselves have tied us to a mediocre life. Not only that, the elderly teacher continued, many people stubbornly hold on to the reasons they can't live the life they've always dreamed of. They create almost credible excuses to justify themselves and others and continue to live with internal turmoil as they realize that those reasons may deceive others but not themselves. What a great lesson! The student pondered while directing his thoughts to his own cows. On the way back, he carefully considered all the limitations he had imposed on himself in life, and he decided to get rid of all the beliefs that had tied him to a dull and ordinary life, as well as those that had prevented him from realizing his true potential. Without a doubt, he thought to himself, that day marked the beginning of a new life, a life without cows. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 48. The unpaved roads. My dad was a huge man, standing 6 feet tall and weighing over 330 pounds. His voice was deep and loud, and he always made you feel it was better not to share a meal with him. Whenever Dad stood there with his fiery eyes and quick temper, you knew what it was like to be truly afraid, an early lesson I learned as a kid. Whenever I did something wrong, there was no discussion about what I did or any reason given to help me change my behavior, just the belt, a hard leather belt. From the first time Dad used it on me, I understood he always had a belt handy. When Dad and his friends gathered at our home, they'd cause a ruckus while Dad reminisced about his days as a Golden Gloves boxing champion. Whenever Dad squared up against anyone, they stepped back. They knew they were no match for him, as no one was tougher or more enduring than my dad. I was thankful when Dad was away most of the time. He worked operating heavy machinery for a construction crew, and his job kept him on the road for days at a time. But every Friday night when I saw his car pull up, I'd find a place to hide. Then my mom would report to him about how bad I had been all week. Soon, he'd call me to the kitchen. As Dad yelled in my face, the smell of alcohol and tobacco would choke me, making me feel sick. "I'm not in the mood for this," he'd shout. "I work hard all week, and I come home to this?" Then the belt would come off. Dad didn't realize that his method of punishment only encouraged the behavior he was trying to stop. And the more I tried to talk to him about it, the angrier he got, yelling, "Do as I say, not as I do." This approach led to more problems as I grew up. And what made it worse was that there was no turning back. I feared Dad and didn't know what to expect from his outbursts. I vowed that once I was old enough, I would leave home and stay as far away from him as possible. Eventually, my parents divorced, and I didn't see Dad for years. My mom kept in touch with me, and one day she called to tell me that Dad was very weak. I wondered what to do next, or if I should do anything at all. We were not close. How could we be after everything he had said and done during my childhood? I didn't even like men anymore. But strangely, I felt a weird pull in my heart, and I decided to call him. "Dad, it's Lindy." "Lindy?" he said, sounding as though he was flipping through his memories of anyone named Lindy he ever knew. A pause followed. I hesitated, carefully choosing my words. "I heard you're not well and decided to call. The doctor says I don't have much longer." "What's wrong?" He started crying and mumbled some words I couldn't understand, then hung up. A few weeks passed, and I thought about Dad's condition and my role in all this. As I pondered, my mom called to say that Dad had been moved to a hospice. My hesitation turned into despair. I knew what hospice meant. I didn't want to believe that his illness was terminal. How much time did he have left? I needed to know. I drove to the hospice quickly. When I arrived, 2 nurses and a doctor were there to console me. After reviewing Dad's records, I had all the information I needed. Years of hard drinking had finally taken their toll. Dad had chronic liver cirrhosis, which had led to cancer spreading throughout his body. I dreaded what was coming. I felt like I didn't belong there. What would I say to a man I hadn't seen much over the years? It felt like I was in someone else's life scene. Unsure of what I was doing, I walked towards Dad's room, pushing the door open with a strength I didn't know I had. And although I moved slowly, I reached his room too quickly. As I peeked in, Dad saw me and beckoned me inside. "Look at me, Lindy," he said and cried. Then he lifted his arm and showed me his swollen skin. "I'm fading away and there's nothing I can do." "I know, Dad," I said, trying not to feel his pain. Then I listened as he talked about my mom and how things hadn't gone well. He told me he had tried to do his best for me, but it always turned out wrong. "I love you, Lindy," he sobbed. "I'm sorry for everything." I held him as he expressed his regrets, and though I said nothing, my comforting gesture showed that I had forgiven him. Leaving the hospice, my head was spinning. It all happened in one night. In one night, I felt overwhelmed, scared, forgiving, and sorrowful. My dad was a worn-out man, not the man I knew as I was growing up. Nothing could touch him back then. He was a Golden Gloves champion. My weakness gave way, and I started sobbing like a child. I cried not just for what Dad and I had never had in our father-daughter relationship, but for what we could still have had if he wasn't dying. Now, Dad seemed changed and like a father I could live with. But he was leaving, and neither of us could do anything more. But there was still time. In the weeks that followed, I visited Dad every evening after work. We talked. I even ran errands for him and bought him a few things he needed. I began to see sides of Dad I had never known before. I had only known about his bad sides, but now I started to see his good sides, and we were becoming friends. But just as our friendship began to bloom, he worsened. One evening when I visited, the nurse said they didn't think he would make it through the night. The doctor had increased his morphine dose, but it still wasn't enough, and Dad was in a lot of pain. They told me that every 15 minutes an alarm would sound, and at that moment, I could press a button to administer a continuous dose of morphine into Dad's body. I decided to stay with him all night. Dad spoke very little, and each time the alarm sounded, I pressed the button, realizing that every time I did so, it was harder for us to have a longer conversation. Dad held on for 2 more days, and I was with him when he passed away. I held his hand, kissed his forehead, and said, "It's okay, Dad. You can go now. Grandma and Grandpa are waiting for you, and now you can make the roads in heaven." Dad had been a great road builder. He had paved the road that bridged the gap between us. 49. The letter about Santa Claus that still touches hearts after more than a century. In 1897, an 8-year-old girl sent a letter to the New York Sun asking, "Is Santa Claus real?" Unexpectedly, the response became famous and has been recounted every Christmas season for over 100 years. Like most children during Christmas, they often wonder if Santa Claus truly exists. Nearly 120 years ago, a young girl from Manhattan, New York, named Virginia O'Hanlon, who was also 8 years old, had a similar question for her father. Instead of answering her directly, her father suggested she write to The Sun, a well-known newspaper in New York at that time. She wrote, "Hello, dear newspaper. I am 8 years old. Some of my friends say that Santa Claus isn't real. My dad said I should ask The Sun. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus?" "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity do, and you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus. You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not, but that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus, thank God. He lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. Merry Christmas, Virginia. 50. Balancing Trust and Skepticism. Lessons from Life's Uncertainties. When in doubt, leave room for trust, and vice versa. Learning to trust is good, but in some cases, overly trusting your instincts can lead to disadvantages. Someone once said, "If you trust, your chances of success are 50%, but if you don't, your chances are 0." I've embraced this idea and learned to trust in many situations, and most of the time, things go smoothly. For example, I was skeptical about meeting a friend I knew online. His way of talking made me doubt his sincerity. However, I decided to meet him anyway. We met in a corner of a park and talked about various life issues for hours. I realized he wasn't as bad as I thought. Why was I so negative? I was invited to a digital marketing seminar organized by an unnamed entity, only an address provided. I was suspicious, thinking, could this be a disguised multi-level marketing scheme? Despite my curiosity and fear, I attended. Initially, the host's request to greet and introduce ourselves felt like a MLM setup. But as the event progressed, it became lively and thoroughly explored digital marketing topics. It turns out I was too suspicious. Due to my subjectivity from past experiences, I faced a painful loss online. I planned to sell a virtual game account. In the online gaming world, virtual items costing hundreds or thousands are common. I believed that online transactions required trust, like in real life. Unfortunately, my misplaced trust led to losing the game account without receiving any money. This made me start doubting the world again. Why? When I doubted, was there nothing amiss? But when I trusted my instincts, I was wrong. Then I realized that skepticism is necessary in all situations, even if you fully trust. Even with utmost trust, you must prepare for the unexpected. I wasn't mentally prepared for surprises, so it was easy to feel let down. Trust and doubt should be balanced. When you doubt, leave space for trust and vice versa. Life is full of uncertainties that can be hard to believe, disappoint, or even amaze you beyond imagination. Above all, trust yourself more. For others or anything else, a bit of wisdom and skepticism is still essential. 51. The Secret Language of the Forest. News that the young writer Lê Hữu Nam won the 2015 Young Writer Award from the Ho Chi Minh City Writers Association for his novel The Secret Language of the Forest touched many. Despite struggling with a severe heart condition and personal hardships, Nam has always been willing to help his community. His writing sends a message about the environmental risks threatening our world. We had a chance to talk with him. Reporter. Winning the Young Writer Award in 2015 is a great recognition. How do you feel about it? Lê Hữu Nam. I'm really happy. The Secret Language of the Forest is a work close to my heart, created out of my love for literature and nature. I wanted to convey a message through my writing, and it's gratifying to see both readers and professionals appreciate it. This award not only encourages me, but also inspires other young writers. Can you tell us more about the message behind The Secret Language of the Forest? Nam. I'm deeply concerned about the destruction of forests and the extinction of innocent animals, all for human satisfaction. This novel is also my way of confessing to future generations that we are born from nature and should not harm it. Your book features characters from different backgrounds joining forces to save the forest. How does this reflect in your writing style and the structure of your novel? Nam. First, I arrange the characters from children to elders, showing that this battle involves multiple generations. Second, my characters like Mien, Lam, Joe, and Susan, though rooted in reality, represent a blend of Eastern and Western childlike innocence. Third, having international characters emphasizes that the fight to protect nature knows no borders, language, or ethnicity. Whether it's a young American girl or an old monk, they all speak the language of love and justice. The book cover for The Secret Language of the Forest was recently redesigned. After The Secret Language of the Forest, what are you planning to work on next? Nam. I've written several new works that will be published soon, including a collection of essays and short stories. I'm also finishing my first novel, which I started around the same time as The Secret Language of the Forest. With your health not being the best, how do you manage your daily life? Currently, I write to support myself, fully dedicating myself to my passions. Despite physical limitations, I'm mentally strong, which helps me overcome difficulties. From your unique experiences, how do you view the role of literature in human life? Name. It seems we're all caught up in the fast pace of life. Sometimes we embrace it enthusiastically, but other times we feel lost. From my perspective as a young writer and reader, I believe literature infuses a sense of clarity and wisdom, free from life's constraints. True literature leads us to beauty and inspires us amid the erosion of narrow, selfish thoughts threatening our environment.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
52. Why should we forgive others? What is forgiveness? Is it a word or a release of resentment from within? Consider the following story. As children, we were often forced to forgive others' mistakes. If a child took another's toy, their parents would make them apologize and forgive each other. This apology was seen as a declaration of forgiveness. However, feelings of bitterness and conflict might still linger inside. As adults, there's no one reminding us to do such things, and hearing an apology becomes rare. Life gradually lacks sincerity and forgiveness, causing people to become more closed off and resentful. The following story illustrates that hatred is a poison and forgiveness is the most miraculous cure for happiness. It's about a potato. One day, our teacher asked us to bring a clean plastic bag and a sack of potatoes to class. Every time we couldn't forgive someone, we were to pick a potato, write that person's name and date on it, and put it in the bag. After a few days, many of our bags got heavy. Then our teacher made us carry the bag everywhere, whether we were working or sleeping. The inconvenience of carrying a bag full of potatoes made us realize the mental burden we were carrying. Moreover, we had to always be mindful of it, remember it, and sometimes place it in very inappropriate places. Over time, the potatoes began to decompose into a slimy mess, and we didn't want to carry them anymore. Forgiveness does not mean keeping grievances, pain, and dissatisfaction within. Doing so only suppresses pain. You end up dwelling on unhappy memories and wounds, failing to see a brighter outlook. So, forgiveness is first about letting go of your negativity. You must be forgiving towards yourself to know how to forgive others. We often think that forgiving is doing good for the forgiven, like allowing them to shed their mental burdens. In reality, forgiveness is a gift to yourself. It allows the past to remain there while focusing on the present and future. Anger and resentment only cause more suffering, waste time, and hinder our thoughts. Strong people know how to forgive. Being forgiving towards others means accepting your own flaws and being forgiving towards others' mistakes. Instead of always blaming fate or complaining about life or others, spend time doing what you love, being with loved ones, and exploring new places. Isn't that a way to make life easier and more beautiful? Life is short. Learn to forgive others, and it's also a form of forgiving yourself. 53. Yes, you can. After a car accident, Mitchell underwent 16 surgeries and ended up with burns covering over 60% of his body. He couldn't even lift a spoon to eat, dial a phone, or go to the bathroom without help. But Mitchell, a former Navy sailor, never believed he was defeated. "I need to take responsibility for my ship," he said. "It's my success or failure. It's like starting over from scratch." 6 months later, he was flying planes. Mitchell bought a big house in Colorado, some land, a plane, and a bar. Then, with 2 friends, he started a pottery company in Vermont, becoming the second largest employer there. 4 years after the car accident, the plane Mitchell was piloting crashed on the runway during takeoff, breaking 12 of his thoracic vertebrae and paralyzing him from the waist down. "I don't understand what the hell happened. What did I do to deserve this?" Despite this setback, Mitchell trained tirelessly to regain as much independence as possible. He was elected mayor of Crested Butte, Colorado, to fight against pollution from a proposed mining project. Mitchell even ran for Congress, turning his rugged appearance into a strength with the slogan, "Not just another pretty face." Despite his disfigurement and limited mobility, Mitchell continued to go hiking, fall in love and get married, earn a master's degree in social work and keep flying, actively advocating for environmental protection and public speaking. Mitchell's positive spirit led him to be featured on television shows like Today and Good Morning America. His story was covered in publications like Parade, Times, and the New York Times. "Before the accident, I could do 10,000 things. Now I can do 9,000. Should I dwell on the 1,000 I lost or focus on the 9,000 I still have? I know what I need to do. I always tell people I've taken 2 major hits from fate. But I didn't let that be an excuse to give up. I can look at painful experiences from a new perspective. Overall, it's not too bad." Remember, what matters is not what happens to you, but what you do afterward. 54. The Greatest Teacher. This story took place many years ago. At that time, Mrs. Thompson was teaching at an elementary school in a small town in the United States. On the first day of the new school year, she stood in front of her 5th grade students, looked around the classroom, and said she would love all her students equally. However, she knew that wouldn't be entirely true because she had already noticed a boy named Teddy Stoddard sitting at the front desk. Last year, Mrs. Thompson had observed Teddy being unkind to his peers, wearing shabby clothes and often appearing quite dirty. Teddy looked so unlikable. Furthermore, Mrs. Thompson had used a red pen to boldly mark an F on Teddy's personal file, indicating a failing grade. At this school, at the beginning of each academic year, each teacher must review the records of the students in their class. Mrs. Thompson had put off reviewing Teddy's file until last and was surprised by what she read. His 1st grade teacher had written, "Teddy is a bright and cheerful child. He does well in school and is a joy to be around." His 2nd grade teacher noted, "Teddy is an outstanding student, loved by his peers, but he faces challenges as his mother is very ill and life at home is a constant struggle." His 3rd grade teacher wrote, "His mother's death has had a strong impact on him. He tries hard in school, but his father is not very involved, and his family life could affect him without additional support." His 4th grade teacher commented, "Teddy seems indifferent and uninterested in his studies. He doesn't have many friends and sometimes falls asleep in class." Realizing this, Mrs. Thompson felt ashamed of her initial judgment. She felt even more remorseful when, during the Christmas celebration, all the students brought her gifts wrapped in brightly colored paper with beautiful ribbons, all except for Teddy's. His gift was clumsily wrapped in a reused dull brown grocery bag. Mrs. Thompson felt a pang in her heart as she opened it in front of the class. Some students laughed when they saw her lift a fake diamond bracelet with several stones missing and a perfume bottle that was nearly empty. But she quickly silenced the laughter by praising the beauty of the bracelet, wearing it, and spritzing some of the perfume on her neck. That day, Teddy waited until the end of the class to tell her, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell like my mother used to." After the child left, Mrs. Thompson sat and cried for an hour. From that day on, she not only taught but also took special care of Teddy more than before. Whenever she approached his desk to help him, his spirits seemed to lift. She encouraged him, and he improved rapidly. By the end of the school year, Teddy had become the top student in the class. Contrary to her statement at the beginning of the year, She did not love all her students equally. Teddy had become her favorite. A year later, she found a note slipped under her door. Teddy wrote, "You are the best teacher I've ever had." 6 years later, she received another letter from Teddy informing her that he had graduated high school third in his class and, "You are still the best teacher I ever had." 4 years later, another letter came. Teddy mentioned that despite tough times that made him feel stuck, he had decided to graduate from college with the highest honors, but you are still the teacher I cherish most in my life. 4 years later, she received another letter announcing that Teddy had earned his PhD and was continuing his education. "You are still the best teacher in my life," he wrote, signing the letter as Dr. Theodore F. Stoddard. The story didn't end there. Another letter arrived at Mrs. Thompson's house. Teddy wrote that he had met a girl and was going to marry her. He explained that since his father had passed away a few years ago, he hoped Mrs. Thompson would attend the wedding and sit where the groom's mother would typically sit. Guess what happened? On that day, she wore the fake diamond bracelet Teddy had given her years ago and used the perfume he mentioned his mother used on their last Christmas before she passed. They hugged joyfully, and Professor Stoddard whispered to Mrs. Thompson, "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you so much for making me feel important and for giving me the belief that I could improve." Mrs. Thompson cried and whispered back, "Teddy, you are wrong. You are the one who taught me that I could be different. I never really knew how to teach until I met you." 55. Fighting with clubs. During an art class at a university, the professor showed a painting by the famous Spanish artist Goya called "Fighting with Clubs." The painting depicts two peasants in a struggle, each holding a rough club. One is raising his club defensively. The clear blue sky gives no hint of what's to come, whether a storm is brewing or the day will remain bright. The classroom was buzzing with excitement as everyone eagerly wanted to share their thoughts. One student interpreted the painting as illustrating the human instinct for survival, a struggle to preserve life. Another student saw it as depicting the quest for happiness. Happiness comes from struggle. Yet another analyzed it as showing that humans are rational animals because only animals fight physically. But here, rational beings are fighting with clubs. The professor gestured for silence and advised everyone to look closely at the painting once more. After a quiet moment, he explained, "At first glance, this may seem like just another ordinary painting. However, a crucial detail reveals its entire meaning. The two peasants, fiercely intent on eliminating each other, are actually stuck in quicksand. With each gust of wind, sand and dust are burying them up to their knees without them noticing." The professor paused for a while before continuing. "Goya wants us to see that both peasants are about to die. They will not perish from the blows they exchange, but from the sand slowly burying them. Yet, instead of helping each other escape death, they act like wild animals, tearing at each other." This painting by Goya somewhat reflects the plight that humanity is going through. Instead of helping each other out of countless disasters, hunger, earthquakes, terrorism, wars, people often fight and kill each other. The painting is not just a depiction of something happening somewhere outside your lives. It's likely unfolding every day in our interactions with others. The temptation to eliminate and dominate others is still gnawing at each of us. One of the best ways to defeat an enemy is to turn that enemy into a friend. Even in desperate and threatening times, let's stand together to protect each other, preserve life, and safeguard our planet. 56. BOBSY. A young mother, 26 years old, looked down at her son who was in the final stages of leukemia. Despite her heart being filled with sorrow, she remained determined. Like any parent, she deeply wished for her child to grow up and fulfill all his dreams. Now, that was no longer possible. Leukemia was preventing her son from achieving his dreams, but she still wanted to create a miracle for him. She took his hand and asked, "Bobsy, have you ever thought about what you want to be when you grow up? Do you dream about what you will do in your life?" "Mom, I still dream of becoming a firefighter when I grow up." The mother smiled. "Let's see if we can make that dream come true." That day, she went to the local fire department in Phoenix, Arizona. There, she met firefighter Bob, who had a heart bigger than the city of Phoenix itself. She explained her son's dream and asked if her son could take a ride on the fire truck. Firefighter Bob said, "Look, we can do more than that. If you can have him ready by 7 a.m. on Wednesday, we'll make him an honorary firefighter for the day. He can come to the station, eat with us, and join us for all the fire calls that day. And if you give us his size, we'll make him a firefighter's uniform just for him, with a real firefighter's helmet, not a toy, with a Phoenix firefighter badge on it, a yellow plastic coat like ours, and rubber boots. Everything is made right here in Phoenix, so we'll have it ready very soon." 3 days later, firefighter Bob picked up Bobsy, dressed him in the firefighter uniform, and took him from his hospital bed to the waiting fire truck. Bobsy sat in the back seat and helped drive the truck to the station. He felt like he was in heaven. That day, there were 3 fire calls, and Bobsy participated in all 3, riding in a fire truck, an ambulance, and the fire chief's vehicle. He was even filmed by the local TV station. With his dream becoming a reality, with all the love and care everyone showed, Bobsy was deeply moved and happy enough that he lived 3 more months, a longer time than all the doctors had predicted. One night, all of Bobsy's vital signs suddenly dropped. The head nurse, remembering the day Bobsy lived as a firefighter, called the fire chief and asked if a firefighter in uniform could come to him at this time. The chief replied, "We'll be there in 5 minutes. Can you do one thing for us? When you hear the siren and see the flashing lights of the fire truck arriving, please announce over the hospital's radio that it is not a fire alarm but the fire department coming to say goodbye to one of its bravest members. And please open the window of the boys' room. Thank you." About 5 minutes later, the fire truck with its hook and ladder arrived at the hospital. They set up the ladder to Bobsy's 3rd-floor window, and 14 male firefighters and 2 female firefighters climbed up to Bobsy's room. With his mother's permission, they hugged him and told him how much they loved him. With his last breath, Bobsy looked up at the chief and said, "Chief, am I really a firefighter now?" "Yes, you are a real firefighter," the chief replied. With those words, Bobsy smiled and closed his eyes forever. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 57. The Boy Who Waited for Mail. Back when I was teaching at a boys' high school, there was a student named Bob who, unlike his classmates, never received any mail. Yet every afternoon, he was the first one to rush to the personal mail slots, eagerly looking into his until all the mail had been distributed before walking away. It wasn't that his family had forgotten him. His board and pocket money were sent regularly and on time. In June, the principal received a letter requesting summer camp for him. It turned out that his father's secretary handled all these arrangements. However, his parents didn't write to him at all. When he confided in me that his parents were separated, I understood the reason. And poor Bob, he kept hopelessly waiting for mail. I often discussed his sad situation with a colleague, Joe Hargrove, who commented, if he doesn't receive any mail soon, it might really affect him negatively. Then, Bob's best friend, Laurent, who came from a loving, happy family and received letters from his parents and siblings every week, came up with an idea. One day, seeing Bob look sadly at the stack of letters he held, Laurent suggested, "Bob, come to my room and I'll read my mom's letter to you." Soon after, I saw them sitting together, discussing the letter. The next afternoon, I noticed that during mail distribution, Bob didn't just look at his slot but also at Laurent's. Bob asked him, "Did you get another letter from your mom today?" "No, today it's from my sister." Then Bob asked another friend, "Do you have a letter from your mom?" "Yes." "Can I read it with you?" "Sure, I'll read it out loud." From that day on, Bob freely read others' letters. All around, the boys would shout, "Hey, Bob, do you want to read a letter from my mom today?" Though boys can sometimes be harsh, I never heard anyone make fun of or mock Bob. One day, Bob casually asked Laurent, "Do we have any mail today?" "Isn't that sweet? They deserve lots of treats and marbles for that." Laurent smiled and responded without hesitation, "Yes, today we have one." This moved Joe Hargrove to action. I thought poorly of Bob's mom by then, but Joe had met her several times and decided to take a chance. One day he found me with 6 typed letters and 6 addressed envelopes for Bob, ready to be mailed. He said, "Look, I'm sending these to Mrs. Lanou. She just has to sign them from Mom and mail one each week." I read those letters. They were well written. Soon after, Bob was back at his spot looking for mail, but now not just at Laurent's slot. Suddenly, the mail distributor shouted, "Hey, Bob, you've got mail! You've got mail!" Bob gently raised his hands as if praying and carefully took the letter, saying as though he couldn't believe it, "Oh, it has my name on the envelope." Then he shouted, "I have mail! I have mail! Does anyone want to read my letter?" The others cheered, shouting, "Yes, yes, Bob, read your letter aloud, read it." The mail distribution paused as they lifted Bob onto a table and gathered around. Bob hesitantly read, "My dear son." Then he looked up and said, "I can't read fast." Laurent reassured him, "No worries, Bob. Take your time. It's better to read slowly and understand each word." And Bob slowly read the letter, filled with the loving words any mother would write to her child. In June, during the award ceremony, I saw Bob's mom attend. I wasn't surprised by this, because after all the letters Joe had prepared were sent, she started writing to him herself. A real miracle. Bob showed me a letter she sent saying she would attend the ceremony. After the award, she pulled me aside and asked, "How did my letter sound to you?" "It was wonderful." She continued, a bit hesitantly, "I want you to tell Bob about me. My husband and I are getting along better now, and we plan to have Bob come home for the summer, and we will try to understand him better. Rest assured, I will do my utmost to help you. Need I add that there's no job that brings me more joy than this one?" 58. The Will. One day I stumbled upon a locked metal box on top of a cabinet. My dad said it contained my grandfather's will. Inside, it detailed what he left for me when he returned to the earth. This made me think, if I ever had to go far away, what would I leave for the people I love? So, I decided to write my own will. I found a lockable box and stored my will and all my worldly possessions inside. My first will, written when I was 8 years old, was quite short because I didn't own much, and my world was small. I left my dad a photo of him carrying me with a big smile. My mom a picture of her soothing me outside Notre Dame Church. For my 2 younger brothers, the brand new toy cars I had to fight to keep. For my best friend, a fabric hat. As I grew up, no matter what, I'd come home every New Year's Eve, sit by the window and write. Each year, my travels with friends and for work took me to more places, and I collected more items. A bone comb from Ha Tien, dried magnolia buds still fragrant from a night by the Tien River, a common seashell from a beach in Nha Trang. Each item, I thought, I'd save for someone special. These items marked my presence in the world, the places I'd been, and the love I had for the people who'd come and gone in my life. Every year, the box filled up with more valuables: a dried fig, a cicada still green. When my grandfather passed away, my dad opened the box and read the will to everyone. The only thing my grandfather left was his land, divided equally among everyone, land for fruit trees, for yams, and for rice. He left me a bookshelf and a small triangular piece of land, right next to the fields he had worked on all his life. On that land, I could grow tomatoes and water spinach, he wrote, with all his love. He once said that with just a little piece of land like that, no one could ever starve. I've stood on that piece of land and cried many times. Over the years, I realized how short and uncertain life is. It's better to let others know you love them now rather than keeping that love in objects that, maybe one day, might only disappoint them. I was sad thinking I should have given my brothers those toy cars when they would have truly enjoyed them instead of keeping them for years. Since then, I haven't written any more wills. I still pick up lovely little things I see, but instead of storing them, I give them away whenever I get the chance. To this day, I still keep my empty box as well as my grandfather's 2-page will because I know one thing he left me is always full in those boxes, the love I have for every person I meet and for this life. 59. Rice, noodles, and life. Mom was so heartbroken when she gave birth to him and cried so much watching him grow up every day. Deep down, she wished he would stay a child forever, always in her arms. But she knew, even as he grew, his soul never really aged. When he was little, he didn't mind his awkward walk. It just hurt so much. Watching him try to walk made his mom cry. Her eyes cried, but her mouth smiled, and she encouraged him, saying, "Keep walking, son. You have to walk on your own 2 feet, even if they are wobbly." She wanted him to understand this deep meaning, but his young mind couldn't grasp it fully. Yet he reassured himself, knowing his heart ached seeing his mom cry. He loved his mom the most, and she loved him the most. As he grew older, not that he grew wiser, he still lived with his mom. He noticed how small their house seemed compared to the neighbors. Always wondering but unsure whom to ask, he asked his mom. After asking once, he never asked again because it made her cry. She would ask if he preferred a big house or a small one, what he wanted so she could buy it, or what he wanted to eat so she could cook it. Why did she cry while giving? Why was she sad while offering? It was different from before. Innocently he asked, and innocently she replied. And from that innocence, he noticed the differences between his mom and others. His mom had white hair. Others had varied shades. His mom had veiny hands. Others had fair, gold-flecked hands. His mom woke early and stayed up late. Others stayed indoors all day. His mom loved him, and sometimes he felt others' moms loved him too. Right. Each mother loves her own child just as everyone lives in their own home. He had a mom and a home, so why make her cry with such questions? He knew, he understood. He just didn't have the words to express it. It's sad for those who can think but cannot speak, who stand on the fringes of things, accidentally. As a child, his mom took care of him, her hair still black. As an adult, he had to take care of her, now with her hair turned white. He understood that, but what could he do now, with his clumsy legs and hands? What to do? Somewhere from a large house, a song echoed, "Poor hands, poor tattered hands." He just felt so sorry for his mom. People say there's no dead end in life. He still had value. Once when his mom was sick, he hurriedly brought her a bowl of porridge. Mom always said he was foolish, but knew Mom was sick, foolish but knew Mom needed medicine, foolish but knew how to buy porridge, foolish but knew to run back to Mom quickly. People got used to seeing him. No one bothered or teased him. No one wanted to hurt him. Because everyone has a soft spot for innocence, so when he brought porridge to his mom, people realized he was still useful, meaning he could work and earn his own money. After that day, he became a waiter, calling it that to sound fancy, but really, He just served rice noodles at a local shop. Serving rice noodles became his daily joy, making him and his mom happy, lightening her hair a bit, easing her sighs when she heard the song. Old mother like a ripe banana on the tree. When the wind blows, mother falls and I'm left alone. Orphaned. Oh, how hard it is. Orphaned, everyone knows how hard it is. But only he knew the extent of his hardship. Now, every day, his hands are happy, his feet are happy. The bowl of rice noodles he carries never tilts even though many watch with concern, afraid it might spill. Eating rice noodles becomes an exciting event for some, needing a little thrill to make it tastier. Those eating like him, he likes serving them, supply and demand satisfying both sides. So, he lived happily with his job serving rice noodles. But then, one rainy day, a kid waiting for his bowl of rice noodles asked, "Will you serve rice noodles all your life?" If the child's mother had been there, she might have scolded, "Why ask him that? Just eat." But since the kid was alone without a parent, he received a hard-to-understand reply from him, "Rice noodles are life." Right, rice noodles never die. They're not afraid of unemployment. They're not forgotten. If not today's rice noodles, then tomorrow's. Rice noodles never disappear. Eating to live is the rule. He chose rice noodles as life, choosing immortality in his useful days. Every day people eat to live, if not one dish, then another. Every day someone eats rice noodles, if not one person, then another. What's so hard about choosing rice noodles as life? He works hard every day, uses his hands, feet, and mind to make sure his bowl of rice noodles doesn't tilt. If he's giving his all like this, isn't that worthy of respect, of being cherished, of some kind of reward? He's lived a life fully committed to rice noodles more than ever, and his mom is happy seeing this. She can rest easy knowing he has chosen his life well, a choice not everyone understands. Sometime when you eat rice noodles, remember a guy like him. To see that being a person is hard, choosing a life is even harder. Once chosen, how should one live it fully, passionately, making one's life useful in some way? We think we have it all, but sometimes we don't know how to live it right. But for him, choosing rice noodles as life, though he isn't perfect, he has lived fittingly within that imperfection. Being able to rush towards tomorrow is a joy, but how many of us can actually do it?
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
60. The last 5 roses. She looked down at her basket of roses, just 5 left. She usually sells sticky rice during holidays, but today she's added roses for extra profit. In the morning, a single rose could fetch as much as 20,000 VND, but as the day wore on, the price dropped with the setting sun. Now at dusk, she would gladly sell all 5 for just 2,000 VND each. She frequently sprinkled water on the roses to keep them fresh. She cared for the flowers diligently, although she hadn't paid much attention to her own appearance since getting married. Her husband was a coarse man, often drunk and gambled frequently. After their divorce, she returned to her hometown with her 2 growing children and struggled to make ends meet through her small business. Watching young women riding on motorbikes or walking with their partners, holding roses as fresh as their beaming faces, she felt a deep, sorrowful ache. It made her throat tighten and her heart hurt. She sighed deeply. "Hey, how much for the rest of these roses?" "Just 5,000 for 5, she replied. A man about her age pulled up on a shiny motorcycle. His voice slurred slightly. "Where's your husband that you're still out here selling at this hour?" She felt uneasy but responded politely. "Would you like to buy some?" "Just take them. Here's 20,000 VND. Keep the change. It's Women's Day after all. We should treat ladies with respect." She was flustered but happily arranged the 5 roses. carefully placing them between sheets of delicate white paper cut into floral designs. As she handed him the bouquet and took the money, he handed it back to her. "I'm giving these to you. Go home early to your family today. No more selling. I've bought these. If you keep selling, I'll ask for my money back." "Just give them to your wife," she muttered, feeling embarrassed. "My wife already has hers." He revved his engine and sped away. Holding the bouquet, she treated it as if it were no longer hers until that moment. Gently, she placed the flowers in a vase on her father's altar. Her daughter asked, "Mom, did you have some flowers left over?" "No, someone gave them to me," she replied proudly. Looking out onto the empty alley, she thought of the busy streets beyond. She felt truly happy. In the hustle and bustle of city life, someone had cared enough to give her a bouquet of roses. Even if it was a fleeting gesture, perhaps inspired by a drink, it brought her a delayed joy, a cherished moment for a woman in the twilight of her life. 61. Tomorrow is promising. Leaves turn green and then yellow. Flowers bloom and then fade. Looking at the dried leaves and withered flowers leaving the branches, you might think they are gone forever. But as spring comes and goes, flowers that faded bloom again, and bare branches sprout fresh green leaves. The quiet, empty path becomes filled with vibrant flowers. What was lost yesterday is completely restored. Seeing all this, do you feel anything is missing in this world? It is because of the falling flowers and leaves that the soil becomes fertile, containing hidden strength. It is the decay and destruction that pave the way for a bright spring next year. In those fresh sprouts, in those bright buds, in those youthful smiles, aren't the names of those who have passed written? Without the old leaving, how can the new arrive? Birth leads inevitably to death, and death promotes birth. In the eternal, ever-changing universe, where life and death cycle endlessly, we won't live forever, but we can exist eternally. Tomorrow. No matter how memorable today is, tomorrow will arrive without hesitation to replace it, whether we resist or remain calm, survive or perish. Tomorrow, though ordinary and unseen, quickly becomes today, then yesterday, and joins the days that have passed. Tomorrow is unpredictable, a series of question marks that pull us forward another day, making us a day older, yet still unsure of what we will gain or lose. Tomorrow is challenging. It requires work, thought, and struggle. Tomorrow is fragile, like human happiness, susceptible to illness and suffering. Tomorrow is like a blank sheet of paper. We can accept it and leave it blank, scribble a few lines on it, or turn it into a colorful masterpiece, full of profound thoughts and emotions. Thus, tomorrow depends on our creativity. For lovers, tomorrow could be a beautiful chapter. For the struggling farmer, it might be a bountiful harvest. Even if a great person passes away tomorrow, it isn't tomorrow that defeats them. It is they who make tomorrow great, marking it as a day to be eternally remembered. Don't wait for tomorrow to come to us. Let's walk towards tomorrow. Not by waiting, but by building. Can we truly create a beautiful tomorrow for ourselves? 62. 2 bowls of beef noodle soup. On a chilly spring afternoon, 2 special guests arrived at the door of the restaurant, a father and his son. The father was blind, and the son, appearing to be about 18 or 19 years old and dressed simply, carefully guided him. Despite their modest appearance, the son had the composed demeanor of an educated person, seemingly still a student. The son stepped up to me and said loudly, "2 bowls of beef noodle soup." As I began to write the order, he waved his hand at me and, with a sheepish smile, pointed to the price list on the wall behind me. He asked for 1 bowl with beef and said the other just needed some green onions. At first, I was startled, but then I realized what was happening. He had loudly ordered 2 beef bowls to let his father hear, but they didn't have enough money to pay for both. He didn't want his father to know. I smiled back, acknowledging his intention. The kitchen quickly prepared 2 steaming bowls. The son placed the beef noodle bowl in front of his father and carefully cautioned, "Dad, here's your soup. Be careful, it's hot." He then took a bowl with only broth for himself. The father didn't start eating right away. Instead, he fumbled in his bowl with his chopsticks. Finally, he picked up a piece of beef and quickly placed it into his son's bowl, urging, "Eat up, son. Eat well and study hard for your exams. If you get into college, you can be a great help to society someday." His voice was gentle, and despite his clouded, lifeless eyes, his face brightened with a warm smile. Surprisingly, the son accepted the beef from his father's bowl and quietly put it back without any protest. This exchange kept repeating, with the beef in the father's bowl seemingly never running out. "This place is really generous, so much meat in one bowl," the father remarked emotionally. I, standing nearby, began to sweat as the son quickly added, "Yeah, Dad, you should eat up. My bowl is already overflowing." Their interaction deeply moved us all. Unbeknownst to me, the restaurant owner had also come to stand beside me, quietly watching the father and son. Just then, Chef Truong brought over a freshly cut plate of beef, which the owner discreetly indicated was for them. The son, surprised, double-checked, "You must have the wrong table. We didn't order extra beef." The owner smiled and explained, "No mistake. Today we're celebrating the restaurant's anniversary, and this plate of beef is a gift for our customers." The son smiled and didn't ask further. He added more beef to his father's bowl and then packed the rest into a plastic bag. We quietly watched them finish eating and then watched them leave the restaurant. As Chef Truong cleared the table, he suddenly gasped softly. Under the son's bowl were exact bills covering the cost of the beef plate, as listed on the price board. At that moment, the owner, Chef Truong, and I remained silent, each lost in our thoughts. 63. What I want to know. I don't care how you make a living, I just want to know what you long for and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's deepest desires. I don't care how old you are. I just want to know if you dare to risk looking foolish for love, for your dreams, and for the adventure of being alive. I don't need to know what's fashionable in your dreams. I just want to know if you have faced the agony of being let down by life, or if you've closed yourself off because you're afraid of getting hurt again. I want to know if you can sit with pain, yours or mine, without moving to hide it or fade it, and if you can dance with wildness, letting the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, or to remember the limitations of being human. I don't care if the story you're telling is true, I just want to know if you can disappoint others to be true to yourself. Can you bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul? Can you be faithful and thereby trustworthy? I want to know if you can see beauty even when it's not pretty every day and if you can source your life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of a lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, "Yes." I want to know if you can get up after a night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done for the children. I don't care who you are or how you came to be here. I just want to know if you will stand in the fire with me and not shrink back. I don't care where you went to school, what you've studied, or who taught you. I just want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. 64. The Superhero Family. I think my family is a quirky superhero family. Want to know why? Because no matter how tired he is, my dad always makes sure to prepare 3 cups of milky coffee every morning for himself, my mom, and me. He serves each of us with a smile to start the day. Because my mom wakes up at 5 a.m. every day to make breakfast for us. So I always go to school full and satisfied, with a cup of milky coffee as my dessert, because my dad always greets me with a gentle kiss on my head whenever he comes home. He does it every single time, because my mom tends to be quite cranky, to the point that even I can't handle it sometimes. I don't know if it's because we butt heads or because of my dad's love for her, but dad never complains. Because my mom loves to cook several dishes in one day, which means instead of keeping it simple, she uses her limited morning time on weekdays to prepare very complex meals. But on a relaxed Sunday morning, we eat very simply. I don't understand it either, and she always gets frustrated when she's overwhelmed with too much to do while Dad is just reading the newspaper. So, Dad often helps out in the kitchen before getting to his own tasks, because my dad served in the military for 15 years, enduring many hardships, yet he always talks about it humorously, making everyone laugh during and after meals. My mom often has to tell him to stop talking and go take his nap, because my mom suffers from joint pain and neck issues. Yet, even when he's tired, my dad will sit and massage her for an hour instead of using a massage machine. And mom does the same for him, because my mom manages the household chores for a big family of 10, which is not as simple as it sounds. She still finds time to care for orphanages, visit temples, help struggling relatives, and even take care of feeding, bathing, and cleaning the cages of 3 birds. For all these reasons, and many more that I can't remember, I call my family a quirky superhero family. Isn't your family like that too in some ways, right? 65. Lessons in the garden, growing squash and wisdom with mom. Until I was 8, I thought Sunday was named because people spent it outdoors. That's because every Sunday I was in the garden with my grandmother, Nana. I loved the squash plants, their tiny, fragile tendrils clinging to the trellis like little fingers holding tight. They looked so small, so delicate. I would sit on the dirt, watching them, feeling like they needed me. Meanwhile, my mom would be nearby, digging with her garden trowel, also watching the tomatoes just the same. "Mom, should I remove these little yellow flowers?" I asked one day. "Why would you think that, honey?" she gently replied. "I think they might attract bugs that could eat the plants." Mom smiled. "No, those flowers will soon turn into squash, sweetheart." "Really?" I asked. "Just wait and see. You'll soon realize that small things can turn into wonders, remember that." "Small things can turn into wonders," I repeated. "Exactly," Mom said. Every Sunday, I would check on the squash plants, and as time went on, there were more and more squash. "Mom, do you think there are more squash because I keep an eye on them?" I asked. "Yes, when you pay attention to something, it grows. Remember that," she answered. "When you pay attention to something, it grows," I echoed. "Exactly," she confirmed. I took even better care of the squash plants after that. I picked off the dead leaves, and when the tiny tendrils couldn't reach the trellis, I moved them closer. Mom did the same with the tomatoes. But one Sunday, I saw her cutting off a branch and I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand. "Oh, why are you doing that?" "This plant isn't strong enough to support both branches with fruit, so I'm removing one to let the other thrive," she explained. "Oh, you'll have to make similar decisions in the future." "What do you mean? Will something be cut off?" Mom laughed. "Not exactly. You'll just have to make choices when you can't keep everything." "I'll remember that." Over the next few months, I visited the garden every week to check on the squash plants, and I was proud to see more and more squash. Until one day when they stopped appearing, and a few weeks later, there were no more. "Mom, what's happening? I don't see them growing anymore," I almost cried. "That's how it is, sweetie. Everything grows until it stops. Nothing lasts forever." "But I've been taking care of them." "Yes, but things must end to let new things begin." "Is there something I need to remember?" "Yes, Seasons will change, but new things will replace the old. I'll remember that. I continued to help Mom with the other plants in the garden. But then, one day, I admitted, I really miss the squash, Mom. I know, sweetheart. I was thinking, what if we asked Dad to build a greenhouse? We could grow squash all year round. I'm not sure, but maybe we should wait for its season. Or maybe we should try it. I'll ask Dad, okay? That's fine. Dad agreed, and the next week we found a ready-made greenhouse. Best of all, it was covered with a net from top to bottom. This really is the ideal house for the squash, I said. And the tomatoes too, Mom added. We planted squash on one side and tomatoes on the other. A few weeks later, the squash was doing better than ever, and so were the tomatoes. When they bore fruit, we realized how ideal the greenhouse was. Look, Mom, I have a small squash and hundreds of flowers. They're doing better than ever, I said. What a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Mom squeezed my hand. Mom, I think you should remember this. What's that? There will always be a way if you really want to do something, I said. Mom turned to look at me. I saw tears in her eyes. She smiled brighter than ever and squeezed my hand again. Thank you, my dear. I'll remember that. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 66. Talking about friends. Someone once said, you can be just a part of someone's world and still change their entire world. You can bring smiles, share tears, you make them believe they're still good in life, and you always open your heart to them. However, there are simpler ways to describe friendship and what we call friends. One person said, friendship is a relationship that needs to be nurtured slowly and for a long time. Another person mentioned, growing up, I remained carefree, kind, and helpful, which led me to make good friends. I can tell you a secret to living well and having good friends. Open your heart, sow seeds of affection, and eventually you will reap the sweet fruits of friendship. Help others whenever you can, even if they take advantage of you. Don't regret it. Your generosity will be recognized. Believe me, this approach has worked for me. Someone else said, as for how I hang out with friends, my view on friendship is simple. Just give it your all. Help out however you can. Another said, friends are the people I enjoy talking to. Friends are the family I choose. Yet another said, friendship is like a rope held by two people. If it breaks, at least I hold on to my end. It's good enough if we can call each other friend and share a laugh whenever we meet. That's all that matters. Another expressed, friendship is complicated and always takes a leading role. Sure, I have many friends, but it's hard to know who's truly good or bad, which friendships will last or fade. All I know is that I treasure the friends I have. Another said, friendship is also about understanding each other. It's simple yet indescribable. And one more said, being with friends, I'm not too cautious, not overly warm, but also not too reserved. I find myself friendly, but my quirky nature means making friends is easy, though not everyone likes my eccentric ways, and that's enough for me. I don't need many friends, just those who understand me. I like being myself. I don't like to pamper others nor be pampered unless it's the opposite. I think because I'm hard to please, anyone who tolerates me is a true friend, and I'm confident I deserve to be a good friend. What would you say about your friendships and friends? 67. The Thorn of the Rose. He really is a grumpy old man, Becky said as she left the hospital room of her patient at the charity hospital where she had been working for over a year. This new patient had been there for about 2 weeks and had made life hell for all the nurses. He cursed, yelled, and kicked anyone who came close. He even intentionally spilled his food on the bed so that the nurses would have to clean it up, giving him a chance to curse some more. Becky thought he had no relatives since no one had visited him, at least during the time she had to take care of him. One day, a women's group visited the hospital. They sang and brought red roses, giving each patient one. The cranky old man looked at the flower neatly placed in a glass vase on his table and swiped it off with the back of his hand. The vase fell and shattered. Everyone just stared at him strangely. He turned over and faced the wall, turning his back on the visiting women. Someone started cleaning up the pieces of the broken vase. Becky picked up the rose, placed it in a plastic cup, and set it on the bedside table of the old patient. After the women's group had left, Becky returned to the grumpy patient's room holding the rose and plucking its petals one by one, tossing them into the nearby trash can. The old man watched her intently until she plucked the last petal. With just the stem left, she placed it back in the plastic cup. Just as she was about to leave, the old patient grumbled, "Why did you do that?" "I just wanted you to see what you've done," Becky replied. "You've destroyed our care for you like plucking each petal one by one ever since you got here." Then Becky walked out. The next morning when she arrived at the hospital, the doctors told Becky to clean the old patient's room. He had passed away the night before. As Becky was gathering the sheets to wash, she saw the rose still intact in the plastic cup. The petals had been clumsily taped back onto the stem. Underneath the man's pillow, Becky found a Bible. When she picked it up, a piece of paper fell out. It read, "It's not that I want people to hate me. I just don't want to be forgotten. I was an orphan child and I've never had a family." Having been an orphan herself, Becky realized that the old patient wasn't just a grumpy old man. He was someone with no one in the world who cared about him. He felt everyone would forget him even while he was still alive, and all he wanted was for someone to remember him. 68. A taxi ride. I'm a taxi driver. Not many drivers are willing to work the night shift, but I do, especially since my recent breakup with Rachel. On that last night of the year, I had a passenger who left a lasting impression on me. I got a call at 2:30 a.m. I stopped the car in complete darkness, except for a dim light shining from a small ground floor window. Usually, like any other taxi driver, I would honk once or twice and wait a bit. If no one came out, I'd just drive off. But for some reason, this time I got out and walked up to the door, thinking maybe they needed help, and knocked. "Please wait a moment," a shaky voice responded. After a brief silence, the door opened. A petite old lady stood before me, dressed in a floral dress with a small hat that had a veil. A small suitcase sat at her feet, and the room behind her looked like it hadn't been lived in for years, everything covered with white sheets. "Could you help me with my bags to the car?" she asked. I lifted the surprisingly light suitcase, offering my other arm for support as we walked slowly to the car. "You are so kind," she said softly, not looking at me, as if speaking to someone else. As we got into the car, she gave me the address and asked, "Could we drive through the old market area?" "That's not the shortest route, ma'am." "I'm not in a hurry." After a pause, she added, "I'm heading to a nursing home." Her eyes sparkled. "That's good. The doctors have told me I don't have much longer." I turned off the meter and asked, "Where would you like to go first?" For the next 2 hours, we drove around the city. She pointed out the building where she used to work, the apartment complex she and her husband rented when they were newlyweds. She asked me to stop in front of a furniture store that used to be a dance hall where she went dancing as a young woman. Occasionally, she asked me to slow down by a building or a particular corner, stopping in the darkness and silence. As the first rays of the sun appeared on the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go." We arrived at the address she had given me without another word. It was a nursing home for the elderly with no family. 2 nurses and a wheelchair were waiting at the gate. The old lady stopped, pulling out her wallet while asking me gently, "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing at all," I said. "But you need to make a living," she replied softly, not surprised at all. "There will be other passengers," I answered. Impulsively, I leaned down to hug her. She hugged me tightly in return. "You have given me so much," she said. "Thank you." I gently squeezed her hand and turned away. It was still dim outside. Behind me, the nursing home door closed. It was also the sound of a life coming to an end. I didn't pick up any more passengers that day. I just drove around, lost in thought, and wondered, what if she had met a rude driver or someone in a hurry? What if I had honked and driven away or refused her request for a special route? And suddenly, I felt incredibly happy, realizing that even a lonely heart like mine still had much love to give, and therefore not all doors are closed yet. 69. The shirt button. Startled awake, I felt a dry throat and clumsily sat up to gulp some water from the fridge. The cold water refreshed me. It was past 4 a.m. I walked over to my computer and turned it on. I opened my journal program intending to record the day's activities and thoughts, but instead, a flashing red alert popped up. "Next week marks the first day you met M." I adjusted the settings to view that first day and smiled at how childish I was back then. I decided to scour the internet for a unique greeting card to send her. Finally satisfied with a meaningful one, I pulled open a drawer to grab a CD with my picture for the card, but instead, I found a neatly wrapped gift. Knowing it was from M, I excitedly unwrapped it. On top was a large greeting card, and beneath it, a cute tabletop clock and a shirt button. Surprised by the button, I quickly opened the card. "Dear love, it's been 3 years since we've known each other. I've enjoyed every moment and learned so much from you. You are talented and accomplish much, living well with everyone, regardless of their status or wealth. You're deeply appreciated and respected by friends and family. Tonight, like many others, I came over at 9 p.m. and you were still not home. I saw your mom mending your shirt burnt by a cigarette. It made me think of you and everything at your place. Please accept this clock with a message. Time coldly ticks on. Some things can be done tomorrow, but some cannot." And a shirt button with a heartfelt message. Sometimes people know much yet overlook simple things like how many buttons are on the shirt they wear. You live for others, yet you're missing someone very important. Please look at the paper below. Wishing you happiness and success. I held the clock and the button and unfolded the neatly placed paper beneath. It read, "I see you enjoying with friends at home, unwinding with plenty of beers, discussing life, work, and politics. I see your mom cleaning up leftovers, picking up every can, to exchange at the market for some lemons to help you sober up. I see you engrossed in newspapers every morning, contemplating various issues. I see your mom carefully organizing the papers, hesitantly asking if they weigh enough to sell. I see you fully enjoying time with friends, never leaving early. I see your mom restless until late, her room empty by 2 a.m. I see you after a long day, turning on the air conditioning and fan, resting without a worry. I see your mom on the porch during hot days, mumbling about the electricity bill. I see you, a computer enthusiast, constantly pondering over upgrading your CPU. I see your mom deeply enjoying traditional opera, laughing and crying in front of a glitchy TV since your rainy adventure. I see you, a skilled IT professional, effortlessly managing company software yet unable to fully appreciate a mother's love. I see your mom, not needing a computer, silently programming life's necessities, aware of your sister's unpressed shirt and your unpolished shoes for a week. I see you involved in big tasks, yet overlooking the small details around you. I see your mom, always dealing with the trivial, teaching you profound life lessons. 70. Lincoln's Letter, a Father's Hopes for His Son's Education. Dear Principal, please teach my son the following lessons: that not everyone is fair or truthful. Teach him that for every dishonest person we meet, there is someone who is noble. For every selfish politician, there is a dedicated leader. It might take time, but please teach him that $1 earned through hard work is worth much more than 5 found on the street. Teach him to handle defeat and to enjoy victory. Teach him to stay away from jealousy and to appreciate the quiet joy of winning. Show him that bullies are often the easiest to defeat. Help him discover the wonderful world of books, but also give him time to think quietly about life's eternal mysteries. The birds in the sky, bees in the sunlight, and flowers on a green hill. Help him trust his own opinions, even if everyone around thinks he's wrong. Teach him to be gentle with the gentle and tough with the tough. Teach him not to follow the crowd blindly. Teach him to listen to everyone, but to filter what he hears through a screen of truth, accepting only the good. Teach him to smile when sad and that tears are nothing to be ashamed of. Teach him to scoff at cynics and to beware of too much sweetness. Teach him that he can sell his muscle and brain to the highest bidder, but never to let anyone buy his heart and soul. Teach him to ignore those who shout and to stand firm for what he believes is right. Be gentle with him, but don't coddle him. As only through challenges can one truly become strong. Teach him to always have absolute faith in himself, because then he will always have absolute faith in humanity. I know this is a big request, but please try your best. If so, my son will truly be a fortunate and happy boy.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
71. A turning point. After 25 years together, my marriage ended, and my husband moved out of the house where our daughter was born and grew up. Things seemed simpler now that our daughter was in her 20s, or at least that's what I thought. Since she was no longer a teenager, we didn't have to discuss childcare or support. I didn't have to deal with him visiting her, and I didn't have to try to explain the inexplicable to kids. However, I felt relieved that things would be much simpler for her at her age. She was away at college, an adult, not facing the daily annoyances at home or the emotional turmoil of her parents splitting up. I did my best to ensure that my own pain didn't affect their father-daughter relationship. I told them that from that moment on, their relationship had nothing to do with me and I wouldn't interfere. I tried to act normal when I saw his number on the phone bill the school sent for my daughter, but I must admit I was very angry. At times like these, I practiced being joyful and calm and tried to suppress the pain and rage. Over the next few years, I quietly observed every step my daughter took, sometimes wondering if our failed marriage had any impact on her. But what I saw was her strength, independence, confidence, sense of humor, and love for life. In the end, I congratulated myself for handling everything well without hurting her. Then, one evening during her Christmas break, with only 6 months until her graduation, we sat down at the dining table in her new apartment. She confessed to me that she was really scared of the upcoming graduation ceremony. She helped me realize that the broken marriages of parents do affect their children, regardless of their age or how well they might be living. All my friends' families will be there, and there will be lots of parties throughout the week. I feel sad every time I see you cry when you meet Dad or hear about him. I can't ask either of you not to come because one of you is my father and the other is my mother. That makes me not want to graduate at all. I felt like I had been struck a heavy, painful blow. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Tears started streaming down like a river. I was shocked. My heart ached. shocked because my own tears had inadvertently scarred my daughter's tender soul, and heartbroken because my issues were affecting her willingness to embrace a significant milestone in her life. Being a straightforward person, I gathered all my strength and told her, "I know, it's hard to say this." I paused for a moment and continued, "There are only 6 months left until you graduate. Your father and I both love you very much. None of us want your graduation or any important event in your life to be overshadowed by our issues. I promise I won't cry anymore. We will do everything we can for you." And we did, with all the effort from both of us, our family, and our friends. There were tears on the day of her graduation, but they were from both of us as we watched our daughter walk up the stage to receive her diploma. That night at dinner with my daughter, I realized how valuable my decision was. By trying to have a heartfelt conversation with her father, dining together and sharing my thoughts, I had lifted a long-held burden. I realized that forgiveness had seeped deep into my heart, erasing all the anger and pain. It was truly a significant turning point, not just for our family of 3, but also for our extended family and all of our friends. Now, we are busy preparing for another significant milestone, my daughter's wedding. This fall, my ex-husband and I will once again sit beside each other, this time in the front row of the church, and we might cry together again, but this time out of happiness for our daughter. I remember a teacher I admired once told me, "Forgiveness benefits the forgiver more than the forgiven." And she was absolutely right. 72. Something special. I need to do something special for her. I won't just throw things around anymore to avoid nagging from my wife. Something unusual, something I haven't done for her before. Tears streamed down the man's face as a reporter asked him, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't see your wife again?" At that moment, I thought the question was somewhat silly when posed to husbands of terrorism victims. This reporter seemed to lack any human decency, asking that question to men whose wives were victims on the plane that crashed into the Twin Towers. Naturally, we would all do something special for our partners if we knew our time together was limited. That insensitive reporter made me furious, mixing a bit of fear and contemplation as I watched the news about terrorism in America. I muttered, "What a madman," and turned off the TV. I needed to rest, to enjoy life. I decided to ignore the images of the collapsed buildings, ditch the tedious relationships, and disregard the demands of the workers. But how could I escape the obsession within me? Alan, my husband, and I run a farm. This afternoon he was harvesting soybeans in the field. I decided to take the American flag he had fixed and hang it behind the tractor, wanting to share our losses with the country and show our support that American farmers are still working hard. Back at home, facing a mountain of dirty laundry, I started thinking about the interview earlier. The question lingered in my mind. I would do something special. The well-dressed man just interviewed won't have the chance anymore, but I can. I hope Alan and I have another 40 years together. But what guarantees do we have? Something I haven't done before. Oh, just being tidy would surely make things neat. I could do that. After 30 minutes of cleaning and vacuuming, I went outside to wash the pile of dirty clothes. I ran into trouble right from the start, putting soap into the washing machine, needing just enough to clean without stopping, but I overloaded it, causing the system to jam and the clothes to entangle. Doing something special, I needed to clear out the blocked waste pipe. Unexpectedly doing this would surely astonish Alan. After several unsuccessful attempts and aching arms, I doubted I could finish. I prayed to God. I needed his help from start to finish in everything I was doing for Alan. I really wanted to do this for my husband. Suddenly, I realized my mistake. How could I bother God with such trivial matters? Thousands of prayers for humanity to love one another are more important right now. I whispered, "God, I'm sorry. How could I be so selfish? I should have spent more time in the past 3 days praying for the comfort of the victims' families, for wisdom for national leaders, and for the healing of humanity. My urgent prayer now naturally arose from deep within. I always pray to God whenever I face difficulties, but praying didn't seem right at that moment. No longer worried about failure, I tried the hose again. The washing machine motor kicked in and it forcefully pumped out the water. As expected, Alan was extremely surprised and pleased to see everything neat, and I was also amazed at the lesson this morning taught me. First, the uncomfortable question from the news reporter helped me apply an important real-life lesson right within my own family. The pain of the husband who lost his wife taught me to love my own husband. I will continue to do many special things for Alan. The more significant lesson I learned is that God oversees everything for us. He understands every hardship that human strength cannot endure. He watches over us, and He accompanies all of us who need His care as we have good intentions for anyone we love. 73. My mother. Throughout my childhood and even as I grew up, I always disliked my mom. The main reason was that she had only one eye. It made me the target of teasing and jokes among my classmates. My mom was a cook, working hard to support my education. One time, she showed up at my school and it embarrassed me deeply. Why did she have to do that to me? I ignored her, shot her a look full of hatred, and walked away. The next day, one of my classmates shouted, "Hey, I saw it! Your mom has only one eye!" I was so ashamed that I wished I could just disappear. I wanted her out of my life. That day, when I got home, I told her, "You just make me a laughingstock." She didn't say anything back. I didn't care about her feelings or her words because I was full of anger. I just wanted to get away from home and have nothing to do with her. So I studied hard and eventually I earned a scholarship to study in Singapore. I later got married, bought a house, and had kids. My wife came from a well-to-do family and I hid my mother's existence from her, claiming I was an orphan. I was content with my life in Singapore, with my family and all the comforts I had. I bought my mother a small house and sometimes secretly sent her some money, telling myself that I was fulfilling my duty. I made sure she had no contact with me. One day, out of the blue, my mother came to visit. It had been years since we last saw each other, and she had never even seen her grandchildren. When my kids saw an old, weary-looking woman at the door, some of them laughed and some were scared. Furious and worried that my wife would find out, I yelled, "How dare you come here and scare my kids? Leave now." She simply replied quietly, "Oh, sorry, I must have the wrong address," and she quietly walked away. I didn't bother to contact her for a long time. She had caused me embarrassment among my friends when I was young, and now she was threatening the life I had built. One day, I received an invitation to a school reunion sent to my home, and I lied to my wife that I was going on a business trip. After the reunion, out of curiosity more than a desire to see her, I stopped by my mother's house. The neighbors told me she had passed away a few days earlier, and with no relatives around, social services had taken care of her funeral. I couldn't shed a single tear. They handed me a letter she had left for me. "My dearest child, I always thought of you. I'm sorry for showing up in Singapore unannounced and frightening the children. I was happy to hear you were going to the reunion, but I was too ill to get out of bed to see you. I regret having made you feel ashamed among your friends all those years you were in school here. Did you know, when you were very young, you had an accident and lost one eye? I couldn't bear to see you grow up with just one eye, so I gave you mine. I sold everything I had so that the doctor could proceed with the surgery, and I've never regretted that decision. I'm so proud of who you have become, and I take pride in what I was able to do for you. You have seen a whole new world with the eye I gave you in my place. I love you so much, Mom." 74. Three great teachers. Knowledge is not wisdom if it's only drawn from books. Horace. As Hassan, a Muslim philosopher, was nearing death, someone asked him, "Hassan, who were your teachers?" Hassan replied, "I had countless teachers. It would take months, even years to list all of them, and it's too late for that as my time is short. But I can tell you about three of them. The first was a thief. Once I was lost in the desert, and by the time I found a village, it was very late and everyone was asleep. However, I finally found one man who was digging through a wall of a house. I asked him where I could stay, and he said, 'It's late, but you can stay with me if you don't mind being with a thief.' That man was incredible. I stayed there for a month. Every night he would say, 'I'm off to work. You stay and pray for me.' Whenever he returned, I would ask, 'Did you steal anything?' And he would always reply, 'Not tonight, but tomorrow I'll try. It's possible.' I never saw him despair. He was always happy. Once, I had been pondering and pondering for years and couldn't grasp any truth. I was so desperate that I thought I should end all these meaningless endeavors. Then I remembered the thief who confidently said each night, 'Tomorrow I'll succeed. It's possible.' The second teacher was a dog. When I went to the river to drink, a dog appeared. It was also thirsty, but when it looked into the river, it saw its reflection and mistook it for another dog. Terrified, it barked and ran away. But when its thirst overcame its fear, it returned, jumped into the river, and the reflection disappeared. I realized this was a message to me. One must overcome fear with action. The last teacher was a child. I came to a city and saw a child holding a lit candle to place in a temple. I asked the child, "Did you light this candle yourself?" The child replied, "Yes." Then I asked, "Before, the candle was unlit, but suddenly it was burning brightly. Do you know where the light came from?" The child laughed loudly, blew out the candle, and said, "You see, the light has disappeared. Now where do you think it went?" My pride shattered completely, along with my ancient and modern knowledge. Then I realized my own ignorance. From that moment, I discarded all my pride in my knowledge. Truly, one could say I had no single teacher, but that doesn't mean I wasn't a student. I considered everything a teacher. My spirit of learning was always more open than anyone's. I learned from everything, from the branches and grass to the clouds in the sky. I didn't have one teacher because I had millions of teachers from whom I learned whenever I could. The essential thing in life is always to be a student. What does that mean? It means having the ability to learn, always being ready to learn, to accept the meaning of everything. The teacher is someone through whom we start to learn how to learn. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. 75. The Red Mahogany Piano. When I was 20 years old, I worked for a piano shop in St. Louis. Once we received a special order via a postcard from Southeast Missouri. It read, "Please send a red mahogany piano for my granddaughter. I will pay $10 a month with the money I get from selling eggs." The handwriting suggested it was from an elderly woman. She filled the entire postcard with her request, repeating it over and over until there was just a small space left for the address. Of course, our company couldn't sell a piano on such terms, so we ignored the postcard. However, one day, when we had other deliveries in Southeast Missouri, curiosity drove me to visit the old woman's address. It was exactly as I had imagined. She lived in a run-down shack by a field. The floor was dirty. Chickens ran everywhere. No car, no phone, no job. Nothing but a roof over their heads, and it wasn't even a good one. Her granddaughter, about 10 years old, was barefoot and wearing a patched dress. I explained to the old lady that we were sorry but couldn't help her, but my explanation seemed to have no effect. Every 6 weeks, we would receive another postcard insisting on a red mahogany piano and promising $10 a month. 2 years later, I started my own piano company and sometimes advertised in the local Missouri paper. I began to receive postcards just like the ones at my old job. I ignored them because what could I do? Then one day, we got some new pianos, including a red mahogany one. Despite knowing it could be a loss for my company, I decided to deliver the piano to the old woman's house and told her she would have to pay $10 a month for 52 months. I placed the piano in the least leaky part of the shack and warned her and her granddaughter to keep the chickens off it. Then I left, thinking I had essentially given away a piano for free. But every month, without fail, $10 arrived, all 52 months. Sometimes not just paper money, but coins taped to a postcard. After the payments were complete, I had no contact with the old lady for 20 years. Then, while on a business trip in Memphis, I stopped at a restaurant and heard the most beautiful piano playing I had ever heard. It was a beautiful young woman playing. I approached her, and after she finished playing, we talked. Miraculously, it was the little girl in the patched dress from the shack 20 years ago. She told me that since her grandmother got her the red mahogany piano, she had won many music awards at school and locally. Now, she had a family of her own, and her grandmother had passed away. I asked her if she knew what that red mahogany piano meant. She said she was too young back then to understand much, just that she had a piano. But I understood. Finally, I told her, "I'm so glad to have met you, but now I must go." And I really had to go because, men never want to be seen crying in public. 76. Don't think you're all that. Booth Tarkington was a renowned 20th century American writer and playwright. His novels, The Magnificent Ambersons and Alice Adams, won Pulitzer Prizes. During his heyday, Tarkington often told this story. It happened at an art exhibition organized by the American Red Cross. I was there as a special guest. While standing in the exhibit area, 2 young girls around 17 or 18 years old approached me and sincerely asked for my autograph. "I'm sorry, I don't have a fountain pen with me. Can I use a pencil to sign?" I asked. And I knew they wouldn't mind the pencil, but I wanted to seem like a big shot, a famous author who remained humble in front of his everyday readers. "Of course," they eagerly agreed. Their joyful expressions made me quite pleased with myself. One of the girls took out a beautifully hard-covered gold-spine notebook from her purse for me to sign. I pulled out my pencil and graciously wrote a few encouraging words before signing my name. After seeing my signature, one of the girls furrowed her brows, studied me carefully, and asked, "So you're not Robert Sherwood?" "Oh no," I replied with a bit of arrogance. "I am Booth Tarkington, the author of Alice Adams and a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner." She turned to her friend and shrugged. "Mary, can I borrow your eraser for a second?" In that moment, all my pride and vanity burst like a bubble. From then on, I always reminded myself, no matter how talented you are, never think you're too impressive. 77. How to be happy. Many times after experiencing a lot of pain in life, we find ourselves wondering where happiness is. We search endlessly and still can't seem to find it. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh has offered us a perspective on happiness as follows. We all have our own ideas about what happiness should be. We think that to be happy, certain things must happen in a certain way, and if they don't, we conclude that we are not happy. This can trap us in our own notions of happiness, which often prevent us from being truly happy. For instance, if we believe that obtaining a specific degree is essential for our happiness, and we think we can never be happy without it, we are trapped by this idea. While there are many opportunities to be happy, we lose them because we confine our happiness to this specific notion. There's a story about a guy who said, "My life's happiness depends on marrying this woman. If I can't marry her, I'd rather die. Happiness would be impossible. This man has tied his entire life to the notion of marrying her, thinking life has no meaning if he doesn't succeed. Our attachments to these ideas, referred to as delusions in Buddhism, bind us. The Buddha taught, the past is gone. The future is not yet here. There is only one moment for us to live, the present moment. We shouldn't seek happiness in the future. If we bring our minds back to the present, we will see that we already have everything needed for happiness right now. Once, a businessman and hundreds of others came to hear the Buddha speak. The Buddha knew they were overly concerned with future achievements. He taught them to stop searching for happiness in the future because it is available right here and now. The present is beautiful. We can enjoy the blue sky, white clouds, birds singing, and flowers blooming, the wonders of life. The clarity of a glass of water is a wonder. Can we be fully present and enjoy it, or are we too distracted by future plans? Living in the present moment is the art of being happy. If we are happy now, we will likely be happy in the future. But if we aren't happy in the present, the future will probably be no different. Suppose you rush through washing dishes to enjoy a cup of tea, thinking it will bring you happiness. But then you hurry through drinking your tea, already focusing on what's next, missing the moment entirely. Live peacefully in the present, where true happiness is simply finding peace within yourself. 78. If parents divorce, I've heard that if you hug a photo of someone you miss and sleep with it, you'll dream of them. But Mom, why do I do this every night and still don't see you in my dreams? My wife passed away unexpectedly 4 years ago, and feeling overwhelmed and unable to care for my parents, I'm very tired and discouraged. One evening when I came home, too tired to greet my son more than briefly, I didn't want to eat dinner. I just changed out of my suit and went to bed. Suddenly, a loud noise and a bowl of instant noodles spilled all over the bed because there was a bowl hidden under the covers. You little rascal! I grabbed a clothes hanger and went out to give my son, who was sitting playing, a beating. My son cried and said, I ate all the breakfast, and by evening I was so hungry because I hadn't seen you, so I looked for something to eat. I found some noodles in the kitchen and wanted to cook them, but you told me not to use the gas stove on my own, so I used hot water from the shower to make the noodles. I made one bowl for myself and left one for you. I was afraid the noodles would get cold, so I put them under the covers to keep warm until you came home. I was so absorbed in playing with a toy I just borrowed from a friend that I forgot to tell you when you came home. Not wanting my son to see me cry, I hurried into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and cried. Once composed, I opened my son's room door and saw him in his pajamas, tears streaming down his face, holding a picture of his mother. From then on, I took better care of him, especially when he started first grade. I beat him again when his teacher called to say he hadn't come to school. I took off work immediately to look for him everywhere, and after several hours I found him at a stationery store standing in front of a video game, and I hit him in anger. He didn't explain, just said, I'm sorry. A year later, I received a call from the post office saying my son had been dropping off lots of unaddressed letters, causing them trouble during their busiest season. I went to the post office, brought back the letters, and threw them in front of him. Why are you causing such mischief? He cried and replied, These are the letters I wrote to Mom. Tears welled up in my eyes as I asked him, Why so many at once? He replied, When I was smaller, I couldn't reach the mailbox. Now that I'm taller, I can, so I sent all the letters I've written up until now. Hearing this, I was at a loss for words. After a while, I told him, Mom is in heaven now. From now on, when you finish writing a letter, you can burn it to send it to her. After my son went to bed, I opened the letters to see what he wanted to say to his mother. One letter moved me deeply. Dear Mom, I miss you so much. Mom, today at school there was a performance I was supposed to do with you, but I didn't participate because I don't have you here, and I didn't tell Dad because it would make him miss you. That's why he looked everywhere for me, but I stood in front of a video game to make it seem like I was just out playing. Although Dad scolded me, I was determined not to tell him why. Mom, every day I see Dad looking at your photo for a long time. I think he misses you as much as I do. Mom, I'm starting to forget what your voice sounds like. Mom, in my dreams, can I see you just once more, to see your face and hear your voice? Is that possible, Mom? I've heard that if you hug a photo of someone you miss and go to sleep, you'll dream of them. But why, Mom, do I do this every night and still don't meet you in my dreams? After reading the letter, I burst into tears. I couldn't stop blaming myself. How can I fill the void left by my wife? We parents bear a great responsibility by bringing a child into this world. Mothers shouldn't work too much overtime. Fathers shouldn't drink too much or smoke heavily, and must take good care of themselves to fully love their child. Don't destroy your health just to make more money. What's the point of wealth without health? And don't think that having more money will solve everything. Who knows what the future holds? Parents, please don't consider divorce over trivial matters. The greatest pain from such a breakup falls on the child. Whether you're married or not, remember to cherish it. 79. The value of morals and their expression in social life. When criticizing Durkheim's idea of an eternal, unchanging moral doctrine suitable for all historical eras and cultures, Friedrich Engels argued, ultimately, all previously existing moral doctrines are products of the economic circumstances of their time. In a society with class distinctions, morals are class-based. Each class has its own morals, reflecting the practical relationships that underpin their class position, namely the economic relationships involved in production and exchange. Engels believed that there are no truly absolute morals in the ultimate sense. However, Engels did not deny the importance of moral doctrines in social development. He thought that morals, like all other fields of human knowledge, undoubtedly progress. Thus, the progression of morals results from the evolving values of morality throughout history. Some moral doctrines may only promote social progress temporarily, while others may hold long-term value for social development. What then are moral values? What standards do we use to assess them? As we know, morality as a social consciousness can be seen as a collection of notions about good, evil, right, wrong, conscience, responsibility, happiness, and fairness, as well as the rules that assess and regulate behavior between individuals and society and among individuals within society. In a class-based society, the dominant moral thoughts are those of the economically dominant class. This class uses the state apparatus to propagate, educate, and institutionalize its moral views into standard moral principles, turning them into measures to assess and adjust individuals' behavior in society, aligning with its interests. Value, in the broadest sense, can be understood as something that makes an object useful, meaningful, and valuable to an entity, recognized by everyone. Values can be divided into material values, spiritual values, personal values, common values, and social values. There are views that value is inherent in an object, but each entity can assess it from different perspectives, leading to different notions of value. We believe this view is incorrect because when discussing value, we refer to what is universally recognized and aligns with societal interests. However, value also has a historical nature. From these concepts, we can understand moral values as what people choose and assess as actions that have a positive meaning for social life, supported by conscience and public opinion. Social interest is the objective standard of moral values. Thus, moral principles and standards only hold value when they adjust behavior in line with societal interests and are supported by public opinion. Therefore, moral values are determined by their suitability to the requirements of social progress. However, societal interests and the demands of social progress have historical characteristics, meaning that each stage of social development has its own requirements for interest and progress, thus affecting moral values. Engels mentioned that the moral injunction, "do not steal," only holds value in societies with private property rights. In a society where all motives for theft are eliminated, a moral preacher proclaiming the eternal truth of "do not steal" would be laughed at. Moral values are expressed through the functions of morality. At any stage of social development, morality, in our view, primarily serves the following functions. Firstly, the function of regulating behavior. This regulation is done in two main ways. One, through public opinion, which praises the good, encourages the right, condemns the evil, and criticizes the bad. In this case, moral value depends on the strength and correctness of public opinion. Whenever public opinion is strengthened and developed, supported by everyone, it becomes a powerful force in regulating morality. Our nation has a saying, "Stone monuments may wear away, but the monuments of the mouth endure forever." Indeed, monuments of the mouth, public opinion, have been transmitted over thousands of years, enduring longer than stone and becoming a potent tool in regulating moral behavior. Therefore, if public opinion is guided by advanced moral doctrines, it will contribute to adjusting moral behavior, making it suitable for social progress and creating true moral values. 2. The individual themselves voluntarily regulates their behavior according to social moral standards. This method depends on the education and enlightenment of the moral subject. In moral relations, the moral subject participates in behavior and judges their own actions. When acting, the moral subject relies on standards formed within themselves. These standards have absorbed social moral standards and are created by the individual's living conditions and specific social relationships. If these standards align with social moral standards, they become an objective basis that makes the individual's moral behavior align with societal interests, supported by public opinion. Conversely, whenever an individual's standards deviate from societal standards, it leads to moral behavior that does not align with societal interests. In this case, public opinion will condemn and criticize. When judging their own behavior, the moral subject relies on their personal moral standards. If they feel remorse or shame for not fully trying and thus failing to fulfill a moral relationship as per their standards, their conscience suffers. Conversely, when they fulfill a moral relationship as per their established standards, their conscience feels at peace and they are proud of their behavior. Thus, with this method of regulation, moral value depends on the moral standards formed within each moral subject, forming a basis for individual moral behavior that aligns with societal interests and social progress. Secondly, the educational function. This function is performed through the education of society and the self-education of each individual. Moral education is the process of propagating social moral thoughts and standards, turning them into measures to assess and adjust the behavior of each individual to achieve alignment between individual behavior and societal interests. In their daily activities, individuals not only seek material and spiritual benefits but also pursue their own progress and want to be praised and recognized by society. Therefore, social moral thoughts and standards become goals and directions for their individual activities. Repeated moral behaviors create relatively stable moral relationships and are regularly maintained and reinforced by public opinion, becoming habits, customs, and moral traditions that directly influence the moral development of the next generation. In this case, the value of morality always depends on the correctness and scientific nature of the thoughts and moral standards propagated and educated in society. Individual moral self-education, firstly, is shown by each individual through the self-judgment of their conscience about their behavior to reinforce their personal moral standards, to achieve behavior that aligns with these standards. Additionally, based on public opinion, they self-adjust their behavior and even their personal moral standards when they find them deviant from societal standards. In this case, moral value is determined depending on the sensitivity and seeking nature of the subject in cultivating and training morality to align with social moral thoughts and standards. Thirdly, the cognitive function. Whether social moral thoughts and standards become moral relationships in social life depends not only on the correctness of moral thoughts and standards and the propagation and education in society, but also largely on the ability of each moral subject to receive and transform them in their cognitive activities and behavior. Through selection and assessment, moral subjects form beliefs, moral ideals, and principles in their own behavioral interactions. Moral cognitive activity also includes two levels: emotional and moral thoughts, and moral experience and theory. Moral cognition at the level of experience or emotional morality is closely linked to practical activity with the moral relationships of society and is always influenced by public opinion, customs, and moral traditions. This process forms within the moral subject, but the images, the idols considered as direct standards for assessing and adjusting their moral behavior. For example, a child often observes the behavior of their parents with friends, with family members, at work, etc., and will likely do as their parents have done before. Moral cognition at the level of thought or theoretical is principled cognition guided by the fundamental interests of the class, of society. Through the process of cognition as well as practical activity, the moral subject analyzes, assesses, and selects moral thoughts and standards in society to, based on that, prove, explain that the moral thoughts and standards formed within themselves are correct and reasonable, to absorb what is correct and reasonable, and criticize the wrongs in other moral thoughts and standards. Thus, we can say that moral value formed in each individual always depends on the education and reception of correct and reasonable moral thoughts and standards of society.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.